don't know why I just felt like laughing. All right. Welcome back to the HPP podcast. I'm Rich Harris, and thanks for joining us again. Last week, we had a great show that featured an in-depth look into the Portland Trailblazers with Oregon Live reporter Aaron Fentress. You can listen to that episode or any other episode at hoopsprospects.com. Please check that out. We're also been doing weekly stock reports and weekly college notebooks. So the stock reports may be of special interest to people because we're usually not repeating people once we talk about it, at least not immediately. And the show's broken down into chapters, so you can easily jump to whatever section you want to listen to. All right, so Maverick Swinson remains sidelined, but I am once again joined by sharpshooter Drew Barton. Today, Drew and I will be discussing the biggest news in college hoops, talk about the prospect stock who's rising and falling, which I just mentioned. We'll be joined by two guests, hopefully, Kansas State forward Keontae Johnson and Chris Solari, who covers Michigan State hoops for the Detroit Free Press, or the Freep, as it's known. Outstanding newspaper, by the way, always has been. Drew, how are you doing? What's new in life?
Busy past couple of weeks. I know we mentioned on the last show, Stanford's just been kind of, trying to operate as usual. So everyone's kind of picking up some extra slack. So I'm actually working today, just jumping in between my lunch break to get the show in. So just been busy, but I'd rather be busy doing what I want to do and getting in the industry than I guess sitting around not doing anything. So
yeah,
can't complain too hard.
That's funny you bring that up because I was talking to someone today about, how I got into this and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, it turned out to be, it was going to be my retirement project and just my retirement hobby. And I now work more than I ever have in my life. Especially the night before the show. I rarely get a full night's sleep the night before the show. There's too much basketball to watch. There
are worse things, I guess, to be busy about, but it is
sure,
quite a bit.
Sure, I could be on the Ukraine. I could be on the front lines in the Ukraine, which would probably be slightly worse.
Yeah.
By the way, Stanford must give really long lunch breaks because we do not talk. We do not do anything concisely. So
it was more of I got up early to get a head start so I could justify taking a little extra time here and there. But it's I kind of forget the nice thing about, when you kind of go back and get a real job again, it's more just like, hey, here's a deadline and get it done. I don't care if you do it over the span of a week or you do it all an hour before it's due, just get it done and get it done right. So that's actually convenient.
Yeah. And that's the way we work around here too. Pretty much, except for the show.
For the most part.
The show's about the only thing that we really is calendar based. All right, so nothing earth shattering going on in the NBA to my knowledge. So we're going to jump right into college basketball, and we'll open up with our college notebook and reviewing the biggest developments of the past week. And there were a ton because we got still have a lot of big interconference matchups. But we'll start by talking about the ACC surprisingly won the Big Ten Challenge 8-6 this year. I think it was the first time in like 3 years that they had won it. Mm-hmm. Based on how they've been doing, that was somewhat of a surprise, but I think it more had to do with who matched up with whom. But we'll just take a look at the conference winning percentages that we've been following. And once again, the reason why this stuff is important at this time of year is because it's going to determine these teams' strength of schedule for the rest of the year, which is going to matter at March Madness. Yeah. And leading the pack, still the Southeastern Conference, followed by the Big Ten, and now the Pac-12. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I was going to say the Pac-12's third. How could that be?
No, all right, we are a lot of things. Third is not one of them.
Yeah, let's start that over. Okay, so Big 12 leads, then followed by the Southeastern Conference, then followed by the Big Ten. ACC is where are they now? They're down to 7th or up to 7th, probably. Right behind the Big East. And the Big East in the Big 12 just went 5-5 for the third straight year. The Big East Big 12 Challenge went 5-5. So let's start off with Baylor, who had a weird week. We actually recorded the show last Tuesday, and while we were doing it, Marquette was putting unbeknownst to us, because we had just both picked Baylor without really any discussion, that Baylor was going to win at Marquette, and Marquette put a hurting on them. And for the reasons that you said that Baylor would lose to Gonzaga. You said that Baylor was sloppy with the ball, and boy, were they sloppy against Marquette. Turnovers galore. And Marquette also played, you got to give them some credit. They were coming up with steals and deflections all over the place. I watched that game right after we got off the air, at least the first half, and I knew it was going to be a blowout, so there was no sense of watching more of that nonsense. Right. But, they really were sloppy, and then they turn around and beat Gonzaga. And so... Go ahead.
The Marquette game, it's funny. So the Marquette game, they've played how I thought they would play against the Zags. I mean, if you look, their 3 starting guards, George, Cryer, and Flagler, combined for 2 assists, but I believe it was 10 turnovers. So between your 3 kind of wings, guards, ball handlers, you had 10 turnovers and 2 assists. Super sloppy. Keontae George played like a freshman. He was 5 for 12 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3. And so all of my concerns that I was going to have when they were playing a ranked team actually ended up being an issue against Marquette. Marquette's actually solid. They're not awful.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But, Baylor's, I just looked at Baylor's talent and I was like, okay, like from a talent standpoint, I don't know how Baylor can lose this one. I mean, if I remember correctly, I pull up their schedule really quick. Yeah, they had they'd handled UCLA. They were competitive with Virginia. McNeese State was kind of an in-between game. But, I mean, they had looked pretty good, chaotic, but, the talent had kind of shown through. So I figured Marquette would just be another game for them to kind of get right and going into the Zags. Wasn't the case at all. Now, I will say this, Keontae George, as bad as he played against Marquette, was he showed where his NBA potential is against the Zags. He was, super dynamic. Cut the turnovers down. He had 2 assists, 6 rebounds, only 2 turnovers. He was pretty much the driving force behind that, that Baylor victory. For what it's worth, I think that's a game that the Zags just want back, and I know we have it. It's another talking point. I think that's more of the Zags lost that game than Baylor won it, and that's no knock on Baylor.
Yeah,
that's not to say, but I mean, if you look across the board, the Zags shot better from 3, barely, and we're pretty much even from field goal percentage. So if you feel that the Zags didn't get shot off the court like they did against Texas, you would assume that they'd be, in my opinion, looking at this matchup, I would have felt that they would have won. But I mean, the guard play for the Zags outside of Malachi Smith was pretty pitiful. If you really want to look at it,
right.
And I think that's what cost them.
There's a betting principle. Because 2 that were in play with this game that kind of explains why Baylor lost to Marquette and why they beat Gonzaga. And that betting principle says always bet against a team before a big game because they're going to be looking ahead. The other one is if they bet on a team that just got whooped on, that didn't play up to their potential. And again, that applied. However, I think the big story in that Gonzaga game was the failure to get Drew Timme the ball. And we'll go into Timme more detail later, so I don't want to discuss him too much, but I do want to discuss the last 1 minute and 31 seconds of that game. Gonzaga had a 3 or 4 point lead. Do you remember which? I think it was 4.
I think it was 4, but it was in that ball. It was 1.
It was 3 or 4. I don't remember exactly. Noah Hickman gets the ball. He drives right down to the baseline, has no place to go with the ball, turns it over. Baylor goes down and scores. The next possession, I forget exactly what happened the next possession, but now the game's tied and Gonzaga has the ball. They go in a pick and roll. Hickman rolls to his right off of Timmy. He could have fed Timmy off the roll. He didn't. Could have fed Timmy in the post because Timmy had good position in the post. He didn't. Now the game is tied now. Okay, so they need a basket. Or are they trailing? I forget.
It was within a possession. It was. Well,
the bottom line is they could have gotten the lead back, and I think the game may have been tied at that point. So he rolls to his right, fails to feed Timmy on the roll, fails to feed Timmy when he establishes in the post. Instead, he kicks it out to Malachi Smith, who was in the corner. Timmy then adjusts his body to face Malachi. He's wide open. And instead of feeding him, and Timmy would have had a layup, he wasn't wide open. He was guarded, but I'm saying he would have scored from that position. Something he rarely had in that game was he had been able to establish deep position off the catch. Okay. Yep. He had it now. So what's Malachi Smith do? Instead of passing to the guy who's right in front of his nose, he goes cross court to the other corner. And I don't forget who was in that corner. Oh, it was Strother. And Strother misses, and that's it. Game over.
Yeah. So this is an issue I've had with the Zags for probably the last 2 years. And you have, in my opinion, it's rare in any level of basketball, but have a guy that you are very confident that every time he touches the ball, you're probably going to get at least a good look. Timmy touches the ball, you're probably guaranteeing your offense a good look. If he gets doubled, he's a good enough passer to find the open person. If you leave him isolation with one-on-one in the post, it's a pretty much, at this point, a bucket. He's proven that he can score on any level of defender, whether it was the Mobley brothers throughout the tournament a couple years ago, who are now defenders in the NBA, Sheboy in their last matchup. You have that kind of an advantage. And the Zags, particularly this year, have failed to capitalize on that. I don't care who you are. If your best player, who's an All-American contending for best college player in the country, has 6 shots, you're going to lose. When you play a good top 10, top 5 ranked team, you're going to lose. You know, the issue with Strother has always been the big game shooting has come and gone. He was awful last tournament after a great shooting year. He, I think, made 1 3 throughout their last tournament run. He was 3 for 14 from the field. Bolton had 6 turnovers, and they were still in the game. I mean, Hickman was 0 for 8. The Zags should have won this game despite basically nobody playing really well, except, in my opinion, Watson, who I think did have 3 turnovers, but he was efficient from the field, generated a couple steals himself, was great on the glass. Outside of Watson, nobody really played well, and the Zags still should have won this game.
Yeah, I should note that. Anton Watson just played tremendous. Best game I've seen him play in a long time. He was all over the court. He kept them in the game with just key plays, whether it be steals, blocks, rebounds, and even some points. I mean, the guy was just all over. And I keep on, he's in our top 200, but not our top 100.
Right.
But I just keep on thinking that someday he's going to be in the NBA, just being somebody's AC Green or something like that.
The vibe I get from him is Arkansas Jalen Williams. Not the same, like the same kind of like.
Yeah, but he's more athletic than him.
I'm talking from the standpoint of just like he does all the little things and competes. Obviously, they're different players. Jalen Williams, very different in terms of pretty much their body type, all that, but just the impact. And sometimes I think when we compare players, we kind of get away, and not necessarily us, but like just in general, we get away from a player's impact because we get so caught up in, their body types are similar or whatever. But I'm like, I watch Watson play and go, he's such a glue guy for them. Like if he's not out there, they get ran off the court by probably 15.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so the Zags have just kind of killed me. I understand. Hickman has just been the most polarizing player on this team because you'll see the signs of life, one possession, then the next possession, it's gone. I mean, it's not even game to game anymore. It's possession to possession with him. And I understand, and I think, with the Zags, something that people, especially like myself, fans include, like, how are coming to terms with is the last couple of years, they've been loaded because they've had a main core and have injected one or two lottery level talents. You had Timmy, Kispert, Watson, Nemhard, Jai, and then you inject Suggs, go on a run because you get that NBA level top 5 pick kind of talent into your system. Then, last year you still have Nemhard, Strother, Timmy, Watson, and then you inject a Chet Holmgren. You bring in a Bolton, but Bolton's more of a veteran. He's been around. This year, you're injecting guys like Hickman, who are really haven't played significant roles yet. Now you're asking them to be your starting point guard. Hickman played the most minutes for the Zags in that game. You're asking guys like Malachi Smith, who are coming from a small school where he was the guy to try to come and be, a role player. You need a Strother to step up. You're asking Ben Gregg now to be that third big in the rotation after not playing at all last year. It's just there's so many pieces that are new and or in new roles. And so am I super panicked? Not really. Like, they should have won this game. I think if they played this game another 10 times, I think the Zags might win it 8. There's no way Timmy's this bad.
Yeah, first of all, I was wrong about it. This happened several times when I read off our predictions, because that game was not where I got the schedule. It said, Baylor at Gonzaga, but it turned out that was played at Sioux Falls, a neutral court. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. I actually think if they played this game, 10 times, definitely Gonzaga would probably win 6 of 10.
Yeah.
On a neutral court.
On the neutral court. If this was at home, I think they win 8 of 10. The Zags are tough to beat at home. And so I'm not hitting the panic button, but I'm very tired of this. And I know, we watch basketball a lot. We try to be much more in depth, but sometimes this game is as simple as your best player needs to touch the ball. I'm not saying he has to shoot every time, but when he touches the ball, it draws defensive attention. It forces the defense to actually focus up and be like, I can't just stand around the corner. I have to be aware of this guy, because if he goes to make a move, he's a bucket down low. He's a good enough passer. He will shoot if I leave him open. It forces your defense has to be dialed in. 6 shots isn't going to cut it. Keontae George took 15. Flagler took 14. Was Flagler efficient? No. But when your best players are getting shots up and they're putting pressure, they're getting to the free throw line, the Zags need to figure this out. It was the same issue that happened last year with Memphis when they played Memphis in the tournament. Timmy doesn't really touch the ball in the first half. He gets a few shots here and there, but in the second half, they run everything through him. And then he goes on a run by himself, whether it was assisting or scoring. I think it was like 12 points in a row. And they go from down like 10 to up 2, games wide open. The game isn't that hard, especially in college sometimes. Right. I mean, I don't get what Hickman, Bolton, Strother, Salas, like, what is in their head to think that, like, I'm the guy. You're not. And this is a game that your best player shoots 10 shots, they win. If Timmy takes 4 more shots, they win. I think it's that simple. I think we can't
underestimate transition too. This is a team that we're used to running the floor, outrunning people when they needed to. They don't really have that option this year.
Yeah, not with Watson.
They're better. They're better in transition than a lot of teams, but they're not elite at it. In fact, another team that used to be elite in transition that's struggling to do that this year is North Carolina, who we'll talk about later. I just wanted to make one more point about the Zags, and then we'll move on. It's not doomsday for them in the sense that, they did beat Michigan State. They did beat Kentucky. They did beat Xavier. So, and their losses have been to really, really good teams, 2 of which are undefeated, Texas, Purdue, and Baylor. And they still have one more shot to at least come out of this against the big schools with a winning record on December 17th. In Alabama, which is the Battle of the Vaults, where's Legacy Arena?
I have no idea.
I think that might be Vegas. I think that might be Vegas.
It's a neutral court game, but I'm not sure.
So they play Alabama on a neutral court on December 17th. They also have an interesting matchup coming up this weekend against Washington, which we will talk about in our predictions. All right, so let's move on. Michigan drops 2 this week. You liked Virginia to beat Michigan at Michigan. I liked Michigan. I said Hunter Dickinson would be a problem, and he was in multiple ways, which we'll discuss in a second. But and they lost in London yesterday to Kentucky. Again, another game I screwed up because the schedule didn't indicate it was neutral court that I was looking at. Both games they basically led most of that Virginia game. Against Kentucky. I believe they were in it the whole time. Did they have I think they had an early lead. In fact,
they had an early lead. I mean, it was 73-69 final score. That is a game that again. They play it 10 times. They're probably going to go 500, maybe. They win 4 or 5. I don't know. Maybe.
See, the one thing that's worrying me about Michigan is Dickinson is playing great.
Right.
And Jet Howard is playing great.
Really well.
But who else?
Yeah, that's fair.
That's where it ends, I mean,
my concern with them was I just didn't trust the execution top to bottom. That's why I took Virginia, even on the road, because I just was like, Virginia's going to do it. I'm surprised it was a 70-68 shootout. I would expect that game to be maybe more like in the 60s to high 50s, just the way Virginia likes to defend. But, I just worry about Michigan's execution from top to bottom. And Virginia, that's their calling card. Everyone plays their role. They defend. They play good basketball.
I think Michigan's playing good defense, and Dickinson, he's taken his passing up another level. I mean, he's I don't know if he's the best big man passer out there, but damn, he's close. I will say this though, Virginia people are not happy with him, and this is not the first time. Hunter Dickinson, if he makes it in the NBA, he's going to be the next Bill Laimbeer. And in fact, his assistant coach, Phil Martelli, said if Dickinson doesn't become, after his basketball career is over, he could be a professional wrestler and be the villain and make millions. And you know what? You're right, because he plays on the edge. He's dirty. And and he also, he instigates. He caused almost a fight at the first Maryland game, his freshman season, and then I believe I think he was involved in that fracas last year between them and Maryland. But in that Virginia game, Cafaro is I forget his first name, but he's a 7-footer backup center out of Argentina, plays for Virginia. And he bumped into Dickinson on the way running up the court. So there's no real action in that court. They were the first guys down the court, and he bumps into him. And it was a foul, but usually you wouldn't even call it because the ball wasn't even around. You know what I'm saying? The ball was still in the backcourt. And Dickinson, when he fell, he actually grabbed Cafaro's jersey. He
hooked him and pulled him.
Right. They didn't call a foul on him. They just called a foul on Cafaro. So then Caden Shedrick, who's the starting center and playing very well for Virginia, late in the game, they double team Dickinson. Dickinson gets frustrated. Now, the cylinder rule, which I absolutely hate in college basketball, either you're touching the guy or you're not. But they called a cylinder foul on him. But Dickinson got frustrated. And so not only did he give a shove to Shedrick, but also as Shedrick was going, kind of fell down, but somehow his face got forward in front of his body. He actually took an elbow And as he was swinging the elbow, he reached it out. He wasn't a natural motion like this. He reached out
he caught him. Extended.
Yeah. He caught him really hard. I mean, really hard. He leveled him. Again, no foul on Dickinson, and the foul was on Shedrick for the stupid cylinder roll.
Little home cooking.
No, yes, it was. It was. Yeah, actually, yeah. And Virginia people were furious about it all week.
The first one on the pool, again, should have been a foul, but I think part of it was away from the ball. They just saw it, called it what they saw right away, and then we're like on to the next thing. Right. But the second one with Shedrick was definite. I mean, the first one, you're like, oh, is it gamesmanship? Is it okay? Like he knew the ref wasn't really paying attention. It was, I'm going to bring you down. The second one, that was dirty. That was intent to like, I might lose.
He was frustrated,
but I'm taking a piece of you with it.
Right. Right. So I got a little Hunter Dickinson story to tell. I interviewed him at the G League Elite Camp with Mike Smith. If you remember Mike, he was like a 5'9" little point guard, and it was Mike Smith's super senior year. And they were both at the G League Elite Camp. This was following Hunter's freshman season. And I had just interviewed E.J. Liddell from Ohio State. And with Aaron Wiggins of Maryland. Okay, so both Maryland already had that feisty relationship with Michigan. And, of course, Ohio State always has a feisty relationship with Michigan. And so I made a joke, which I know if I was like interviewing Drew Timme, he would have laughed heartily. And what I said was, I just got done interviewing E.J. Liddell and Aaron Wiggins, and they both said you were the worst teammate they ever played with. They all played on the same team at the G League Elite Camp. And I said, they both said you were the worst teammate they ever played on. And I said, what's up with that? And it was a complete joke. Of course they wouldn't say that. He got mad. He got mad at me. And it was obvious. And he actually was for the rest of the interview, he was passive aggressive. And for example, he would talk to Mike Smith, like during the interview, he would talk to Mike Smith so I couldn't hear it, but he was saying stuff during an interview that was being taped by the NBA. So I don't know who he harmed there. You know, I mean, think about it. I mean, if the NBA sees him being that immature, which they did, they had it on tape, that couldn't have impressed them, you know?
I don't know. I think like a guy like Hunter, and it goes it's almost a different way than like a Timme, but when you're kind of like that throwback back to the basket, big, more traditional forward or center where you're playing in the post, you're living around the basket. Now Hunter's worked to develop his shot. He can pass. Timme can pass. I think you kind of have to have like it's something about you. There has to be like a unique edge. I think with Timme, he's got all those little motions. He's, you know, kind of goofy and funny. I think Hunter is just, again, he's just like, I'm going to be the villain because you're going to boo me and you're going to hate me, but I'm going to score 20 points, grab 10 rebounds and dish out 1 or 2 assists. I think for some people, that's what works.
I don't think it's conscious. I think it's unconscious. I just think he's an angry guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel that I'm going to give him, I guess, maybe there's the edge of like the Lambeer, like I'm going to wear the black hat because if it's on me, I can take it. But yeah, maybe he's just pissed off all the time and he just, you know, has a really short fuse, a la like a DeMarcus Cousins, you know, a young DeMarcus Cousins who just had that he just was, he ran just hot. You know, DeMarcus Cousins, I saw him in Summer League his rookie year, and it wasn't just the way he played on the court, it was the way he interacted with fans. It was just, he was constantly on that flip, that switch was constantly flipped. Maybe that's how Hunter is. Maybe it's just his way. That's how he mentally gets himself into games. And he's like, I'm going to get caught, but I might only get caught once. If I get away with it 4 times, maybe that's worth it. I don't know where his head's at.
I don't think he could control it.
Yeah. And maybe
I don't think he could, at least not now. It's just, you know, it's like Draymond. It's just some people just can't, you know, your frontal lobes control, you know, what you say, what you don't do. Like mine, you know, you could see that, you know, I'll say things that other people typically won't say. That's a frontal lobe thing. And that's just kind of the way you're wired. And trust me, I don't have as much control as I want. And I don't think he has as much control as he wants, or maybe he doesn't care at this point.
Right.
But And by the way, for people out there, I don't let any of this stuff. We have Hunter way higher on our draft board than anybody else.
He's a hell of a player.
He's a hell of a player.
He's a hell of a player.
And I don't really care whether the players like me or don't like me. It doesn't affect how I evaluate them. That would only hurt me, not them. So next item in our notebook is Rutgers is now healthy again. And they beat Indiana again. And for those of you who don't know, for whatever reason, Rutgers really has Indiana's number. They beat them. This is the 6th time in a row and the 9th time in the last 10 meetings that they've beaten them. And Trace Jackson Davis has never defeated Rutgers. What a crazy thing.
Scarlet Knights, baby.
Well, that's the thing. We talked about Cliff Amari. Early, he was one of the first players on our stock rising list, and he's really expanding his game. He's now playing full minutes, and he's an incredible shot blocker and finisher around the rim. And then now the 2 players they've added, that they were missing 2 of the 3 best players up until this week, that game. And Caleb McDonald, he had been back for a few games. But I think he's the reigning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, but he's also playing very well offensively this year, making him, his stock is rising. He's not on our top 200, but he's moving up there. And then Paul McCahey, who's like a 6'7" point guard, he got back in. He's the one who was the final piece missing, and he played in that game. So Rutgers is a team not to be taken lightly. They have 3 really good players and about 3 other, solid players. I think ultimately depth and a lack of true offensive stars is going to hurt them in March. But for now, they're going to be a pain in the neck for a lot of teams.
Yeah, I didn't watch this game, but I just kind of I'm just pulling up the box score because I didn't realize Indiana only scored 48. But you're not going to win a lot of games when 3 of your starters, I think, combined for 2 made shots. It was Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, and I forget the other kid's first name, Thompson.
Race Thompson.
Yes. The 3 of them combined for 8 points and 2 made field goals. And those guys all played. Well, 2 of them played 30-plus minutes and 1 played 17. You're not going to win a lot of games when 3 of your starters combine for 8. Right. So I think that's just more about a really, really off night from them. And I give Rutgers credit.
Yeah, that's the thing. Rutgers is tough to score on in the inside because even when Amari was like a freshman and a sophomore, they had Miles. I can't think of Miles' last name, but he transferred to UCLA last year. But they've always had a really good shot blocker and defensive center, in the interior. So it's just tough to score on Rutgers on the inside in the half court. Right. They also, Indiana was missing their star rookie star freshman Hood Schifino. He missed the game. Now, right now, he's not I still thought, they had a good chance to win without him. I mean, it's not like Alabama missing Brandon Miller. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he's still been a very valuable player for them, and he looks like he's a very promising big point guard. But yeah. So moving on to my pick. My pick to win the national championship. North Carolina dropped 2 more games this week. And now the running total, their streak is now 4 losses in a row. What the hell's going on over there?
I have no idea. I mean, you look at their losses and you're like, okay, you lost at Indiana. It was 77-65. The Alabama game, ranked team, 4 overtimes. Iowa State, I believe they're ranked now. Not sure where they're at, but that's a 5. Their last 4 losses haven't been egregious blowouts. They haven't been blown out the way the Zags have been blown out or the way Duke got blown out by Purdue. But I don't know. I mean, I know Baycott was out, which, obviously that's one of the best rebounders and interior presences in the country. But man, the guards didn't even play horrible. And it's like, still the guards are just killing this team. Like this might be like from especially Love and Davis, efficient from the field, not great from three, didn't turn the ball over like an egregious amount. And I still just feel like the guard play is holding this team back.
Well, yesterday, Baycott, the Indiana game, he somewhat hurt his shoulder. Right. And he was supposed to play yesterday because they said it was just sore. It was no major damage.
Right.
And after warm-ups, they decided they weren't going to play him. So I mean, they cut that Virginia lead thanks to Caleb Love and Pete Nance hit some shots. And I think Virginia Tech, the lead was down to 2. At one point, it was 17.
Yeah, they were getting blown out. Right. They were down 10 at the half. I remember they were down 10 at the half, and then I caught parts of the second half. I didn't watch the whole second half, but they were down 10 at the half. They only scored 27.
Right. And so I thought Love played one of his better games, during this losing streak, probably the best game during this losing streak. But not having Baycott was probably the difference in that game. I don't know. I mean, he played the whole way against Indiana, but he was obviously hurt. He kept on, grabbing that shoulder.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, as I said, North Carolina says it's not serious. There's no significant damage, but they held him out.
This team, what kills me is this team doesn't have like no one's playing like a true point guard. I mean, they had 6 assists as a team. And the usage that you're going to get from an RJ Davis, from a Caleb Love, and the fact that you got 3 assists total from those guys, you cannot win. I mean, you can't win with 6 assists. I'm looking at the Virginia Tech team. They had 3 guys with 4. These guys, I mean, look, are Caleb Love, RJ Davis, are they good players? Did they show us the potential in the tournament last year with their big shot taking and big shot making ability? Absolutely. But at some point over the course of a season, you can't just rely on my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, Caleb. And we'll sprinkle a little bit of Nance and sprinkle a little bit of Baycott here and there. Like you have to play some form of team basketball over the course of a season, because there's going to be a game that you run into a team that's shooting really well, or that, they're moving the ball, and you can't just be like, all right, RJ, do your thing. It's my turn next possession. And after we get like 3 or 4 shots, we'll make sure Nance we'll get a 3 ball up. I mean, I'm looking at 6 assists, and that's awful.
Yeah.
I mean that's actually terrible for the level of talent and shot making between Nance, Leaky Black, RJ Davis, and Caleb Love, with guys like Trimble off the bench, Pub Johnson, who's, solid. There's no reason for you to have 6 assists as a team.
Right.
There's just is inexcusable.
Yeah.
You're not going to win. I think that's what it boils. And this is something we brought up last time. Their passing, just as a whole, their playmaking sucks. It sucks, and that's just what it is.
The other problem is, beside Pete Nance, with Baycott down, they don't have another big. I mean, Jalen Washington was one of their high recruits. He was right up there with Trimble, and he is recovering from a torn ACL, and I didn't think he was going to be out this long. And I have no idea what shape he's in at this point, but it's been a while since he tore the ACL. So
close to a year, right? I think.
Close
to. I don't know if it's been a full calendar, but I feel like it's been close to a year.
So they really need another big body in case one of those guys gets in foul trouble or gets hurt like Baycott is right now.
Yeah, this team is. They got to learn how to play team basketball. That's just what it boils down to.
That they got all the way to the championship game, and
it's kind of like UCLA from 2 years ago when they got bumped by the Zags when they were a 12 seed in the Zags, and all those individuals, they all got kind of hot at the right time. Juzang went on a tear. Jaime Hawkins was playing unbelievable, but they had a true point guard in Campbell to run that show and rein it in. This is a team that got really hot throughout the tournament. Should have lost to Baylor probably in that tournament. I think people forget how close that game was. And now when the ship is kind of teetering, there's not a single person who can take the ball and go, I got it. I'm going to run the show. I'm going to dictate. And in college, sometimes you just need someone to just slow it down. Look at all the best teams. It's usually that they have a guard that you trust to, maybe not score 20, but handle the ball, organize the offense, hit a timely shot, and they don't have that.
Right. Speaking of point guard problems, our next team has their own point guard problems, but they finally got a win, and that's Villanova defeated Oklahoma at home on Saturday, barely won the game, took a last-second shot. But the good news out of this game was that Mark Andrews, the touted freshman, got the start, but they also started Archie Diacono at guard, and Cam Whitmore came off the bench and provided almost an instant spark. I'd say for the first, on the clock, on your watch, I'd say the first 5 minutes, he made a couple boneheaded plays, one offensively, one defensively.
Right.
But then after that, he really showed, why he's a 5-star recruit, why he's considered a lottery pick. And he didn't seem any worse for the wear. Apparently he wasn't practicing. I don't know why, because he had a thumb injury. You think he'd be able to practice to some degree, just have a cast or something. I don't know. But anyway, he gave them a big time spark. And it was funny when they interviewed Oklahoma's coach at halftime. He mentioned, Cam Whitmore like 3 different times. We got to do this with Whitmore. We got to do this with Whitmore. Whitmore's, and it was kind of funny. You're interviewing the opposing coach, and all he's talking about is Whitmore. And I, for once, felt some hope as a Villanova supporter. And the game just went back and forth. It was a tight affair the whole way through. And you know what, though? The last 8 minutes, no Whitmore, no Mark Andrews, and they barely won. They actually looked like they were going to be able to maybe have a decent lead at one point. And in the last 8 minutes, he didn't play, Villanova's coach, Kyle Neptune, did not play the young guys again.
You're talking about Mark Armstrong? Mark Armstrong, right?
No. Oh, yeah, Mark Armstrong. Well, I think
you called him Mark Andrews in the last one. I was like, that's the tight end for Baltimore.
Oh, right. Sorry.
He's Mark Armstrong. But yeah, I knew you were talking about.
Right. So you can both see, Armstrong has a further way to go. And he also plays a tougher position. Okay. Mm-hmm. But you can definitely see that he has the athleticism that a lot of these Villanova guys don't. And with Whitmore, he's like, okay, I know he just had an immediate impact. And it's like, I could not believe we didn't see him for like almost the final quarter of the game.
Yeah.
But they won. But Kyle Neptune is being very stubborn about
I wonder if that's like an injury thing, because he played exactly 20 minutes.
He was under a minute's restriction. Yeah. But
I wonder if he was like, you're getting 20 minutes and I'm going to insert you because the game was close. We needed the spark. They got the spark. Go, hey, you're at 20 minutes. I'm pulling you. Game be. I don't know how strict it is, but I mean,
obviously it must have been strict, but it was a thumb injury.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was nice to see Whitmore out there, though.
Yeah,
if he comes along and develops and catches up, having missed the first month of the season or so. If you have a core of Whitmore, Eric Dixon, Caleb Daniels, and hopefully Whitmore can take a little bit of the load off of those two guys, and Armstrong comes along, this team's going to be a lot more competitive than it looked in the start of the season. I'm not predicting them to be the Villanovas of the past that are, locking in Final Four runs regularly, but this is a team that I wouldn't want to play if, Whitmore gets up to speed, because they have two guys that are playing well, albeit in roles that they're probably not as used to, in Daniels and Dixon. So if Whitmore comes in and helps alleviate the pressure off them, and he looked good, man. Like you said, instant impact. 7 points, 3 steals, and legit NBA talent.
And he already has an NBA body.
And he has,
And one of my concerns was going to be, does he have enough with that extra muscle and stuff,
Right.
and maybe even a little extra weight. Is he going to have the required quickness? Will he be able to do the same things he did in high school at this level? The answer is yes. Yeah. And he also, I felt at the high school level, relied a lot on mid-range type of stuff in the paint, like turnaround, fadeaways, around the paint and stuff like that. But he showed that he could score at all three levels. His jump shot looked good. I'm very encouraged. Very encouraged. Yep. All right. Another Big East team that Bill Walton says is the best team. Now, he was at PK 85 or whatever it was, the PK tournaments. So he's seen a lot of teams this year, which isn't always the case. Usually he only knows about the Pac-12 and that's it. But he saw a lot of teams, and he says that UConn is the best team that he's seen so far this year, and that would include UCLA and Arizona. I don't know if it's the best team I've seen this year, but again, I watched them dismantle. I believe it was it Oklahoma State? I forget who.
Oklahoma State. It was Oklahoma State. Just their last game, and the game before was Iowa State.
Right. So I watched them. Well, I actually watched both of those games, but they took care of that game. Oklahoma State score was, they had a bigger lead than that. Oklahoma State closed the gap. Yeah. But I'm very impressed with this team and think it has Final Four potential. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, this is a team that I wasn't super familiar with. I'm still not. I haven't really had a chance to watch them. I only watched them play 1.5 games. I watched them when they beat down Oregon. And then I watched the second half of their game, winning against Alabama, which was also a game that was won by 20. I mean, I'm looking at this team, I think they've had 4 over their last 4 wins, which have all been pretty convincing wins. Like I said, the Oklahoma State game probably was closer to 15-20 than the 10 points that it was. But they've had 4 different leading scorers across those 4 games, which kind of just shows you right away the depth. They've got legit shooting from I always pronounce it Calcaterra.
Joey Calcaterra, right?
Yeah. He is shooting the hell out of the ball. He's up to 60% from 3. That's probably not sustainable, but if you have a true marksman, Sanogo spreading the court, albeit in a limited fashion. I mean, they are shooting so well. They've got 5 guys actually that I'm looking at now that are all 37% or better from 3. Now, volume, obviously, like Sanogo's not shooting a bunch of volume, but just the ability to space the court, have an interior presence like Sanogo, and then this team's really tough. Like I haven't seen them play their last 2 games, but the game and a half I saw, they caught me super off guard. And I mean, at this point, I don't see how you can't look at this team and say they're not one of the top 5 teams. I mean, they're number 5 in the country right now. Right. Rightfully should be. I think they could probably be even in that 4-3 range, just looking at their resume and like how they're just dominating people.
Right. 4 of their guys moved up on our draft board this week, so we could have 4 of these guys in our stock rising. But I figured we'd just talk about them as a team altogether. And each time I watch this team, somebody else emerges. This week it was Jordan Hawkins. He has such a pretty shot, maybe the prettiest shot in college basketball. And he was lights out against Oklahoma State. He's now shooting 40% from 3 on the season, averaging 13 points per game. Oh, and by the way, almost 8 threes a game. So that's high volume. But Sanogo, again, impressed me with his just all-around play. We talked about Donovan Clingan, who Bill Walton loves. He debuted on our top 200. And then, of course, my boy, Andre Jackson, who still isn't putting up great numbers, but he always makes an impact as a playmaker, always makes an impact as a defender. And part of the reason, for his shooting, I mean, like I said last week, his shot still looks funky, but it doesn't look as funky as it did last year. But he's also recovering from an injury that was on his shooting hand. So we might want to give him a break, a little bit and, wait till, January or whatever to see how he's shooting then.
Yep.
All right. So next in our notebook is the 3 undefeated teams. And I don't particularly have anything to say, except for maybe Maryland, but they are Texas, Maryland, Virginia, all remain undefeated, all had big wins this week. Any particular player or team that you'd like to talk about? I actually got a good look at Maryland this week. So against
I've seen Texas and Virginia. I think we've said everything that's to be said about these teams. Virginia's just playing really solid basketball. They're shooting really well as a team. They're playing Virginia basketball. I think they've got, last time I checked, 4 or 5 guys all right at 10 points per game, which, it's kind of a death by 1,000 cut style. We're going to defend, and we're going to just move the ball, make sure everyone's getting good looks. A little bit worried that they're getting into some really high-scoring games. I mean, they're winning them, but that's not.
Well, they definitely play and get a faster tempo this year.
No doubt about they are. I just, and if they're winning, they're winning. Perhaps this is just my, bias of the last couple of years of watching them kind of grind games out and play just a more slow pace. But I do worry that if they keep getting into these shootouts, and they don't have, some really top-tier go-to scorers that could bite them. But I think Virginia's look really, really good. Texas, I'm still reeling from the ass kicking that they gave the Zags. And I haven't seen too much of Maryland, but again, from the little bit that I've seen, another team that kind of surprised me. I didn't see them being this good.
Right. I don't think anybody did, especially under a new coach. But, the thing of it is with Maryland, the players that could have stayed did stay. And they have taken it up a notch. And we'll talk about one of those guys in Stock Rising. Next item on our list is Nick Smith Jr. made his first start of the season on Saturday against San Jose State. Played 24 minutes, 6 of 14 from the field, 3 of 5 from three-point land, 5 assists, which was really nice to see. And he totaled 16 points. Not much else in the box score department. But, one thing that I was worried about with Nick was, I thought he might be kind of like Brandon Miller, and be a ball hog and kind of play with his head down and, blinders on and not see his teammates. But I didn't really see him take any crazy shots yesterday, and 5 assists. So that game, by the way, was very, very close for the first, 25 minutes. I mean, it was really tight at halftime. And your boy, Amari Moore. Yeah, he played really well. He improved his draft stock in that game. He scored 21 points, 4 assists, 4 steals. The only downside was he had 4 turnovers, but I mean, he's playing against an ultra athletic, ultra long team. So
he's the only guy that they have, really, right. Really.
Yeah. And so he was impressive yesterday. Or was he no, day before?
Right? It was 2 days ago.
Yeah. So now this is a game I didn't intend to watch, and because I didn't think it would be close, but that is Arizona lost to Utah. And did you catch this one?
I did not.
Yeah, it was only on the Pac-12 network. So
I didn't catch this, but these teams just the Pac-12 just cannibalizes itself across like all sports. Utah knocked USC out of the football playoffs most likely, and Arizona, who was like kind of the bright spot in the Pac-12, kind of carrying the load, and they beat them.
Yeah,
I don't know. The Pac-12 is just so hard, man, to like ever get a good feel for. To be completely honest, I didn't watch this game, but this was one that I believe we picked, and I think we both were pretty.
No, we didn't even have it. I didn't even put it on our slate of predictions because I didn't think it was going to be close.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
now,
regardless,
of course, Utah's always tough at home.
Yes.
we know that. And so yeah, but Kirk Risa had a horrible game, which that tends to happen with him. He
is hot and cold, man.
Yeah, one night he can make 7 threes, and the next night he can miss 5, go 0 for 5 and have 5 turnovers. Yeah. So, and actually, he's been better with the turnovers this year. So
he has. He's been their assist guy too. He's
Ballo and Tabelis were steady. But they didn't get a lot of help. Corey Ramey was 4 of 13. It was the guards that really let them down. But I also think Utah played very well, and we're going to talk about one player in particular on Stock Rising. So we're almost done with our notebook, and here was another. This is probably the second biggest shocker, and I can. Well, actually, there were 3 shockers this week, and we saved 2 of them for last. But Creighton lost at home to Nebraska. And yeah, it that's, what I see is a lot of these teams that had rough tournaments, that played a lot of teams, and is, especially if you made the trip to Maui, they just seem to, kind of be out of gas. And I think that's probably, Creighton had to, as soon as they got home, they had to go to Texas, which has become a super tough environment to play at. And just the guards, listen to these numbers from that Nebraska game, which was close, by the way. I think it was 63-58. Is that
no?
63-53.
10-point game, but it was closer.
Listen to these shooting numbers. You sitting down? Trey Alexander, 3 of 12. Ryan Nebhard, who we talked up last week, 3 of 13. Arthur Kaluma, who we said needed to be better with his shot selection, 0 for 8. Baylor Shireman, 4 of 12. Beside Kalkbrenner, of the starters.
Farabello. It was Kalkbrenner and Farabello. The only reason that this was not a 25-point blowout.
Yeah. I'm just not worried. You play at Maui, then you got to go play at Texas. I just think I think they're out of gas. And
I have no concerns about this Creighton team. Just like, I said I wasn't super worried about the Zags. I'm even less worried about Creighton. You are asking a team that has played, at the time when they played them, 21 ranked Texas Tech, 9th ranked Arkansas, 14th ranked Arizona, number 2 Texas, all of those games on either on the road or at a neutral site in relatively short span. I mean, they played in the span of 3 days, played the 21st, 9th, and 14th team, got a week off, and then jump-started December with a road trip to one of the hottest teams in college basketball, and was competitive. I know they've lost 3 in a row. And this is kind of my one. I know the rankings, you lose, you have to be punished, but they are not the 21st best. They are better than the 21st best.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a lot of teams in this country that could beat Texas Tech convincingly, beat Arkansas, beat Arizona in a nail-biter on a neutral site, then go to Texas and almost win that game. I mean, that was a 5-point game on the road.
They didn't beat Arizona, but
close though. Like a one possession game against Arizona.
Right.
They very easily could have won. Texas again. I think they could win. I mean, you play that on a neutral site home.
Yeah, they definitely win. They held their own better than Gonzaga did, for sure.
Exactly. And then, it sucks that it's a letdown, but this is one of those teams, and I hope this is a team that people who really follow the AP polls don't read too much into, because this team is this team is significantly better than the 21st ranked team. 3 losses in a row. I'm not worried at all. I could see this team. They have a stretch where they go BYU, Arizona State, Marquette, but I can see these guys rattle off 6-7 wins in a row very easily, and they're at home for the next 2.
Right. So the next team, who's also dropped 2 this week, is Michigan State, and now with their killer schedule have dropped. Their overall record is now 5-4 because they lost at home to Northwestern. So we'll bring on our guest, Chris Solari for the Detroit Free Press, and who covers Michigan State inside and out, to find out what's going on with this team. Can they turn it around? Is there reasons to be worried? Is it just fatigue and injuries? All righty. So our guest today is Michigan State's football and men's basketball reporter, Chris Solari with the Detroit Free Press, freep.com. By the way, if you're looking for Chris's work. Chris, how's the weather in Detroit today? How are you doing?
Well, it's not too bad here. Middle of Michigan. It's kind of nondescript. 40s. It's very non-winter, which is good.
Okay, we're getting poured on today, so but about same temperature here in Jersey. So I got to tell you, before we get into the Spartans, something funny happened this morning when I was Googling you. I don't know if you know this. I just put in Chris Solari. It shows your photograph. It says actor.
Yeah, there is an actor. I believe his biggest title was the movie Crocodile.
Yes, yes. I looked.
I have seen him. Not a relation that I know of.
Okay.
If we are, we're very distantly related.
Okay.
But I have seen that before.
I got a chuckle out of that. All righty, so we'll jump right in. You know, we've talked about the Spartans a lot on the show because of their difficult schedule, and they played a lot of big games, so they've been involved. To start the season, we had them in our top 30, but not our top 25. You know, they've struggled in their last 4 games. You know, they barely beat Oregon, barely beat Portland, dropped their last 2, including a home loss to Northwestern on Sunday. Is there reason to be concerned?
Well, I think that when you look at it, I mean, it's Tom Izzo going with basically a 10-guy roster at this point. I mean, he's bankrolled 3 scholarships and has 10 scholarship guys. You take out 2 of those guys with Malik Hall and Jaden Akins. Now you're down to 8 guys, and essentially the starting 5, you know, maybe 6 guys, you know, at least 4 of them are getting about 30 minutes a game, and that's very atypical for what Izzo does. Particularly at the pace and style he likes to run. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve that's going on with him in giving guys that many minutes and not having any other options in some points to really go. I mean, he's always, over the history of his career, used the bench as a teaching mechanism. And right now he's got to let guys like Pierre Brooks kind of play through mistakes. You've obviously got Mady Sissoko and Jackson Kohler really splitting the minutes at the center spot. You don't have really a third or fourth option other than Carson Cooper, who they were initially planning on redshirting, but he's shown some promise. But you know, he probably should be redshirting just because of his size. So yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily about concern, because I think we've seen what the talent of this team is in terms of what they did against Gonzaga and what they did against Kentucky, Villanova. But I think you're starting to get into a little bit of dead leg kind of territory here that might creep up again once they get back into Big Ten play.
Right, right. So you actually touched on one of my questions I had down the road for you, and it seemed, what I was going to say is Michigan State seems to lack its usual depth. The rotation's basically only going about 8 deep, the regular rotation. Do you see anyone else breaking into the rotation down the road?
I mean, the problems where they really need guys right now, they just don't have them. Particularly with Hall out. I think Hall is kind of like, from a defensive standpoint, he's a glue guy. He organizes guys around him and gets them in the proper positions, and he does a lot of the little things that I think that don't necessarily show up in a box score, like being in the right spot to stop and cut off a drive, or getting high hands and just disrupting guys. So they don't necessarily have another guy like that. I mean, they've got a walk-on who started at Western Michigan, and Jason Whitens, who's played some minutes. He's kind of an all-defensive guy. And Pierre Brooks right now, at this point in his career, is an all-offense guy. He's struggled defensively, you know, particularly off the dribble. He's really had some issues, and with ball screens as well. They're just, you know, now that Jaden Akins came back, you know, in the Northwestern game, and that's the guy that they really need on the perimeter. Hall's the guy really overall who does a lot of things from the wing and in the post. But Akins gives you a little bit more of I guess, a athletic option to make up for some of the deficiencies, and he's a great two-way player. But there's, you know, do they have anybody else? I mean, you know, the guys that really can extend their minutes at this point would be Jackson Kohler, which I think Mady Sissoko has kind of shown the ability to get out on ball screens and do the little things, and Kohler looks like a freshman right now.
Right.
And I mean, Trey Holloman's getting some minutes, but I don't necessarily know if his skill set is what they need, because, you know, they've got enough guys with Walker and Hogard handling the ball. You know, I mean, he comes in kind of as a, you know, when Hogard or Walker get into foul trouble, he gives him another point guard to really kind of run the show and allow the other guy to go off the ball.
Right. So the last I heard, Malik is due back at the end of the month. Have you heard anything different?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've heard as well. At least till after Christmas, whatever that means. The goal is to get them back before Big Ten play starts again after Christmas. I mean, they've got 2 games right now. They lost to Northwestern, which was, Chris Collins has done a really good job against them the last few years,
right,
and giving them fits. Now they got to go out to Penn State on Wednesday, which is going to be a tough game, particularly with their limitations right now,
right,
in terms of size and toughness. So I think what they want to do, though, is bring Hall along. Because, Izzo has said this in relation to the Jaden Akins injury. He's like, I got a season to win, not a game. And I think that's kind of at this point, when you got 10 scholarship guys, you've got to handle those injuries as cautiously as possible. So, Akins' injury looked a little more like a tweaked ankle, but it just happened to be the one he had the stress reaction fixed in.
right.
I don't think it was another stress reaction. I think it was just something, but you also have to worry about that lingering. Hall's kind of the same way. He had a toe injury that was problematic during the start of practice earlier this fall. So now you got a stress reaction. He's I think the one guy right now that they can't lose for an extended period of time beyond that, just because he does so many things at his size and his ability to play the 3, the 4, and really, if you go small, play a 5. But I think everything I've heard Christmas time is about right.
Okay. When I was watching the game, I wasn't at the game. I was watching on the Big Ten Network. Stephen Bardo seemed to think that Jaden Akins actually aggravated his injury. Did you hear anything or see anything about that?
Which game? The
Against Northwestern on Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, there was the one play where it looked like he got his feet tangled up on a breakout going in the opposite direction when he was on defense. But kind of watching it back, I think he just was out there for a long, extended period of time. Izzo said Monday that he's doing fine and feeling good, particularly for not having had that much practice time. He's feeling healthy and it looked like it at first. I think it was just that it was a really long stretch of ball that he played there, and they couldn't get him off the court, and it was like going back and forth. I think that's where with guys with stress reactions in particular, they're a little more prone to wearing down when they have to go laterally and quick change directions that way.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good because they can't afford, as we said, can't afford any more injuries.
Yeah.
We do, among other things, our main focus here is draft evaluation, and I don't see any future stars on this roster, NBA stars, that is. But I do think there are several players that could potentially be solid pros. Who on this roster, in your opinion, can you see playing, being a solid player in the NBA possibly?
Well, I think Jaden Akins is, when we talk about him, he's got the athletic ability and, that kind of Gary Harris type body where he can go up and get a board, get out and transition, can shoot from outside, attack the rim. He's probably, I'd say, the best in terms of pure pro prospects right now. Walker's an interesting mix, but I think a lot of people kind of give him sort of a Kemba Walker type vibe. He plays pretty good defense. He's got to be more aggressive with his shot. I think that's a big thing for him. He's got to show the willingness to take over games. He has at times, but that's, I think, a work in progress. Joey Hauser's an interesting situation because when you see him at his best, you think this guy can be that kind of next level guy,
like his brother.
Yeah, there's just too many drop offs.
Right.
There's too many games where he's not shooting outside well, but he's starting to do a lot of the little things.
Right.
But he'll get some looks, I would imagine. But he's got to show the consistency to do it. And Malik Hall, I think, is another one that, he's kind of a tweener.
Right.
Izzo kind of loves those kind of tweener guys like that.
Right.
But he does a lot of
the NBA is starting to love them too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Draymond Green effect came right from Michigan State.
Right. Exactly. One guy you didn't mention who I personally probably like the best right now, like if we froze things in time, I know he's 21 going on 22, but that's AJ Hoggard. Now, of course, the drawback for me is the fact that he's never been a great shooter. I saw him shoot really well against Villanova, and I don't know if there was another game this year. I mean, to me, he has the handle, he has the vision, he has good size for a point guard, good speed, but the shot is just not there. What's your feelings on Hoggard?
Well, take what I said about Joey Hauser and then multiply it by about 10, because the things that AJ Hoggard does well, he never does them consistently. Okay. He can play out of control and reckless, and you can't have a point guard doing it. I mean, there are games where he will be really selective with his distribution, and games when he will attack the lane, and then you'll still see those freshman moments where he's going to go behind the back at the free throw line and try and drive down the lane with three guys around him, and gets his pocket pick and goes the other way. I mean, he's got a lot. Like sometimes I think you got to watch with Hoggard what happens after his turnover, or what happens after his missed shot, and how it goes the other way for a touchdown.
Right.
And there's some body language issues, I think, as well, that in that PKI. I think it was the Alabama game. He had a turnover in the paint that was absolutely egregious. You can't. I mean, it was one of those kind of things where he's trying to put the ball behind his back or between his legs on the left block with three guys surrounding him. It goes the other way. Trey Holloman gets beat off the dribble. I mean, he's a freshman, and Hoggard's in his face during the stoppage, just screaming at him. And it's like, well, he's not in that situation if you don't turn the ball over. So there's a leadership component that comes with that. As well. He's not a good shooter. He doesn't understand shot selection, I think. We've seen him a lot early in the season, taking shots early in the clock that are not for him. And I think that's kind of frustrating for Izzo in a lot of ways, because that's a lot of times you'll see those early shots that he'll launch from outside. He's not a great 3-point shooter. They'll get a long rebound and go the other way quick. So, I mean, he's got the talent is there, though. I mean, there's no question that he's got a real special court vision and handle. But sometimes, and I think Denzel Valentine was kind of like this early in his career at Michigan State, sometimes guys can do a lot of those things and think they can and should do them all the time. And that's a learning process for Hoggard that's going to take him, I think, through this year. And it took Denzel Valentine towards the end of his junior year to kind of figure a lot of those things out. Right. And he comes back as a National Player of the Year the next year.
Right. Do you think that him not starting versus Northwestern was a message?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of those things, particularly the turnovers, because the turnovers that he has created, and he didn't have that many turnovers in that Northwestern game. I think he had 2. But again, if you watch him play, like some of the little things, like he's throwing some bad passes that'll get deflected out of bounds and cut the offensive rhythm off that they've had, because it's just a bad decision that'll get deflected. That's not going to show up in a stat sheet as a turnover or anything else, but it kills the rhythm. Right. But he, Izzo felt he played a little better. I thought he played okay, but especially down the stretch, I mean, he showed the ability to get to the rim,
yes,
and get some buckets. But then when once you get within a point or 2 points or wherever it is, then sometimes you see the wild side of AJ kind of pop up too.
Right.
I like the kid. I like the player. I think he's got a will to win. I think he's just trying to figure out the mechanisms of going from being a really talented player who can make a lot of mistakes to being a sharpened kind of leader that can sometimes maybe pull himself back a little bit and not feel that he has to do everything.
Right. So got two more quick questions for you. What are your expectations for the rest of the regular season? And who do you think wins the Big Ten regular season title? Not the Big Ten championship, but the regular season title.
Tough question right now. I mean, it doesn't feel like anybody wants to win it. I mean, it's early on here, but I mean, I think it's going to be a dogfight, maybe a war of attrition in some ways too.
Yes.
You know, I think I don't feel like there's a great team that's there. I mean, I think the team that Indiana's got the best chance to be a great team, just with some of the pieces they've got. I think Purdue's got that chance as well. You know, does Michigan State have that in them? I mean, they showed the ability to win high-level games. We'll see if that pays off down the stretch. But I think, this is going to be a 4 or 5 loss champion, I think, at least this year in the conference.
Right.
As far as what the rest of the season entails for Michigan State, you know, it's going to be a yo-yo. And I think a lot of teams are going to be like that right now. But this Michigan State team in particular, because they've got that. This is such an abstract year for Izzo when you've got only 10 guys. I mean, you know, a lot of times this point in the year, we're trying to figure out how he's going to cut players 11 and 12 out of the rotation.
Right.
You know, or players 10. And right now they're only 8 deep. And that's what it is. So I certainly think that it's going to be interesting to watch to see just how they handle conference play. Not going to be easy, especially if you get another injury along the way. So they're kind of like a TBD to me, because when they're right, you know, like they were early in the season, when you've got those 8 guys that are healthy, and then you can bring, you know, 9, 10, and 11 off the bench for short stints, I think that's when they're at their best. But once you start disrupting it with injuries, you know, that's tough to overcome. And I guess we got to kind of wait and see on Hall if he's not going to be back until after the new year. Then you got a whole different set of circumstances.
Right. I agree. And a lot of teams, I think, in the Big Ten really can't afford, you know, to have a lot of injuries. I mean, imagine Purdue without Edey, or, you know, or Michigan without Dickinson, or you know, stuff like that. So, yeah. All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate your time as always. Hopefully you'll check back with us maybe around March Madness, and we'll talk about more Michigan State Big Ten hoops.
Sounds good, Rich. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Chris. Take care and have a great day.
All right, you see you.
Bye-bye. So now we'll move on to our draft stock report. And the first guy I want to mention was I got to catch Georgetown, South Carolina on Saturday. 2 teams that are struggling. But I watched specifically to watch Gregory Jackson or GG Jackson, whichever you prefer. We call him GG. And it's not so much that his stock is rising, because he's pretty much been around the 10th spot, I think, in our upcoming rankings that are going to be published later today. He's going to be number 9. But it's just an observation I made about his game. And I'll just run down his stats quickly. He's playing, as I said, on a pretty bad South Carolina team, but they did win the game. And his numbers have been, as the schedule's gotten a little tougher, have been dropping. But keep in mind, youngest guy on our draft board, shooting 43% from the field, 37% from 3, 65 from the line. That's okay. 7.5 rebounds a game, 1 steal, 1.1 blocks, only 0.75 assists, and 2.6 turnovers per game. So, but for somebody who just turned 18 years old, playing on a bad team, what I'm impressed with him about, the more I watch him, is that he doesn't really play like a freshman. He doesn't force the issue. He doesn't take bad shots. And he's willing to share the ball. Now, I know that his assist turnover numbers don't show that so much, but there's not much to share with on that team. I mean, that's just going to hurt his assist numbers, just because the players around him are just, you can make a good pass, and if somebody misses a shot, then that's not going to show up in your. So, but yeah, I'm just impressed that he doesn't force the issue, and he seems to play within the system. So, ideally, I know it's not going to happen, but ideally maybe he'd stick around for another year, and maybe it'd be really, nice to see his game develop in South Carolina as opposed to in the G League. I just think actually players probably benefit more from that.
Absolutely.
I don't know about your opinion, but yeah, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And like I said, his numbers are slipping. So there are players that could maybe perhaps, pass him, and maybe he falls further down the lottery. Cam Whitmore is a good example, might actually pass him ultimately, come June. But yeah, I still think he's a lottery pick. So I just wanted to bring that up. So the next guy on our stock rising is Amari Bailey. And he is just getting hotter and hotter. I saw him play against Stanford and Oregon this past week. And his numbers, he was really good in the second half against Oregon. His numbers have been steadily increasing. He's now shooting 54% from the field, 41% from three, 47% from the foul line, but I don't think that's going to last. He hasn't, the numbers, he's only 8 of 17 right now, so not a big sample. Decent rebounding numbers, almost 4 a game, almost 3 assists per game, 1.1 steals. Turnovers, a little high, 2.4, but ultimately, he too is, to me, looking like a lottery pick. Not as dynamic as, say, someone like Keontae George. I think he's a notch below him in terms of, being just that dynamic, having that pro feel. But definitely a really good young player who's, just 18 years old.
I saw him play against Stanford, obviously, and I mean Stanford is not very good. We'll get into some of that later. Disappointing season. My only thing is I need to see, and I know it will come when he plays like Arizona and stuff. I need to see him play just a little bit higher level of competition, because again, on his resume, and we talked about this last time, his 2 games against fellow ranked opponents. I'm not even sure if UCLA is still ranked, I believe.
Yeah.
Against Baylor and Illinois, he was super ineffective. Like beating up on Pepperdine doesn't really impress me. Bellarmine doesn't really impress me. Stanford's not very good this year. Oregon, he did play well. Like I won't take anything. He did play well against Oregon, but you look at his games, the 3 games before and the 4 games after those back-to-back ranked events, he's been really good. But when he's had to play and rise up, I saw Keontae George, and I know we did say Keontae's higher, but I saw Keontae George be the best player on the floor against the Zags, for example. I've yet to see Bailey be the best player on the floor when he's going against other, like his peers. So stock definitely rising because he's doing what he's supposed to do, and he's putting up good numbers and playing well against not great teams. But the next step is going to be like when Arizona comes to town, when he goes to Arizona, for example, to perform as well.
Yep. I agree. So the next guy is the twin brother of Keegan Murray, and that's Chris Murray of Iowa. And not so surprising, their games to me are very similar, and we'll get to see him play on Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden against Duke. But just like his brother, he's putting up huge numbers so far this year. And 51% from the field, 41% from 3. His shot looks beautiful, just like Keegan's. 85% from the foul line, nearly 11 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists, 1 block per game. Again, he's looking to me. The one thing I worried about with both Murrays he's only a junior, but he's 22 years old and will be, 23 this summer. But I mean, so I think he's pretty much, even though he's a junior, I think he's pretty much a lock to come out this year. And the question is, I don't think he's going to go as high as Keegan, but I still think he has a chance to make it into the lottery.
Yeah, I think lottery's just like lower lottery is probably his ceiling in that, 12, 13, 14 range. I mean, he could go on a crazy tear. Again, just another guy that I really want to see against some of the bigger and better programs, like against TCU, who's actually playing really well this year. I think they're like 7-1. And I think they're in first in the Big 12. He had a double-double, but he was pretty ineffective as an offensive threat. Same thing against Clemson, who's also pretty decent this year. I think they're 7-1 and leading the ACC too. Those two games, he wasn't great. He was a monster against Georgetown. He had a 30-point, 20 rebound double-double. Granted, Georgetown's not very good, putting it nicely. So again, just another guy that like doing what he's supposed to do, which I think we don't give enough people credit for. But just as the competition ramps up, I like to see him. If he can stay around that 20 points, 8 to 10 rebounds a game, keep the shooting efficiency high and keep showing that floor spacing, there's no reason this guy is not going to be a first rounder for sure, and probably in that 10 to 20 range.
Yeah, Duke will be a good test because
He'll be playing against Kopowski, Lively.
Yeah, they have athletic bigs, so that would be a great test.
Yep.
Another freshman on our list is Jet Howard, and we talked about him a little earlier. And this guy is just, kind of wired to score. Still has a ways to go defensively, but his offensive game is really polished for a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
Is pretty shot. He's 49% from the floor, 43% from three, 71% from the line. Also, he's been putting up nice numbers in terms of blocks. 1.4 blocks per game. I mean, the guy is like a 6'6", 6'7", wing. So, but that's nice to see. But yeah, he's 3-level scorer. And definitely, to me, clearly the most talented player on Michigan already.
Yeah.
And that's including Dickinson. I mean, Dickinson is a better college player right now, of course.
Howard has NBA potential, though.
Right. But, I think Dickinson might, but we're talking Howard has first-round potential, where Dickinson, is probably, no better than the second round. So,
No, Howard looked really good in that Virginia game. Like, looked really, really polished. The shot making was there. One thing that's really impressed me is outside of that weird overtime Ohio game that they had, which they ended up winning, but they went to overtime, he hasn't had a turnover, if you take away that game, since the November 16th.
Wow.
I mean, that one game, he had 4, but he's only had, if you take that one game out, 2 turnovers on the year. With the polished scoring, now they haven't, before the Virginia game, they hadn't played the toughest schedule. But, like, he just looks really, really polished. I was really, really impressed with him, especially if that shooting holds. I think that this kid's going to, as the season goes on, Dickinson's their best player, but he's going to further cement himself as, like, the kind of 1B to Dickinson's 1A, or Dickinson's 1A. This kid can play.
Yeah, most definitely. The next guy on our list is a junior, another Big Ten guy from Illinois, and that's Coleman Hawkins. And Coleman isn't ultra efficient, but what I like about him is that he contributes in so many different ways. Almost functioning as a point center for that team. He's averaging 4 assists per game. He's also close to 3 turnovers a game, which is something. And that's the one thing that Coleman needs to improve on, is just his efficiency, in terms of shot selection, pass selection, things of that nature, not trying to do too much. But he does everything for this team. It's just, I'd like to see him maybe tone it down in terms of trying to force the issue at times. But this guy's 6'10", and he's mobile. He's a very good defender, inside and out. Obviously better inside, but he's a versatile defender that way. 47% from the field, 37% from three. Only 54% from the foul line, but that's about 10% lower than his career average. So I expect that to come up. 6 rebounds a game, as I said, 4 assists. And here's I love to see these numbers where you're over 1 per game in both steals and blocks. He's 1.3 steals, 1.4 blocks. That shows that he's active all the way around defensively. Yep. You don't find many guys like this. And when I say point center, it's not just like the Jokic type or Hunter Dickinson type of assists, where they get fed in the post and everybody collapses to him and he kicks it out. It's not that way. It's more like he's making a dribble move and he's passing, on the move. Those types of assists. A very versatile player. And definitely to me, has moved into second round range.
Yep. No, I agree.
So another guy, this guy is also a junior, and we've brought up Ricky Council's name multiple times on the show, but never talked about it in depth. But the interesting thing on this star freshman laden squad, he's leading the team in scoring, averaging rounding up 20 points per game, 53% from the field. The one number that's lagging, 33% from deep, also 78% from the foul line. But and he's also doing it in other departments too. 3 rebounds a game, almost 3 assists per game, 2 steals per game. So again, another guy, very capable 3-level scorer. Though you'd like to see the shooting from deep. And he's never career-wise. He only really had one good season, and that was his freshman year at Wichita State.
Super low volume, though.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly, exactly. I think he was like at 1 a game.
Yeah, a little over. So, I wouldn't say he's moved up our board, but he's still, I'd say, outside of draftable range right now. But you got to remember, as we get closer to the draft, a lot of people are going to declare, and then they'll say, I'm coming back. So, when all that gets shuffled, who knows who's going to be left standing. So he could easily move up to the second round range just based on who decides to stay.
This team is going to, just as a quick side note, this Arkansas team, now that Nick Smith is back and looked good against this Arkansas team is loaded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, they are now. They're going to have to try to figure out the issues that have plagued the Kentuckys and Dukes of recent years. The freshmen getting to play at the highest level in the biggest stages, but if you have a 20-point per game scorer and you're introducing another dynamic guard who's probably going to be in that 16 to 20 point per game scorer with a guy like Anthony Black running the show, and this team is freaking loaded.
Yeah.
They are going to be really
athletic.
They could switch everything.
Yep.
This team's legit, folks.
Very much so. So, a guy who had a really impressive week, but it's been on our radar for quite a long time. I mean, Reese Beekman, Virginia's junior. When Reese first came in, he was just known as a really good defender, but he's improved his offensive game, both as a scorer and as a playmaker. And now, even though they still have Kie Clark, you'll see Reese Beekman quite often running the offense. But he's still a very great defender. And yesterday, or the day before, when they played Florida State this weekend, actually in the Michigan game, he turned an ankle. And so he really basically carried that team in the first half of the Michigan game. And then, after he hurt his ankle, he was pretty quiet in the second half. Yesterday, he was literally limping the whole game and still, played a solid, if not good game. Don't know his exact numbers. Let me look them up. He played 31 minutes against Florida State while limping around. And finished with 7 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. So not his best game. And there's only 1 for 7 from the field, but still, again, the guy wasn't close to 100%. So on the season, first of all, that told me right there, what kind of player he is, to play in pain like that. But on the season, from the field, he could get a little better, 43%, but from 3, he's 47%. For the foul line, 86%. And he's pumping 5.1 assists per game with only 1.9 turnovers, which is excellent. 1.7 steals per game and 0.7 blocks per game for a 6'3" guard. He's very athletic. I can remember when I thought, okay, Reese Beekman's finally getting his act together. It was last year against Notre Dame. And I saw him consistently burn Blake Wesley. Blake Wesley's now in the NBA, and Beekman kept on constantly beating him off the dribble. Now, Wesley had a ways to go as a defender, and I thought people, were overlooking that last year. But
absolutely.
Still, just from a pure athletic standpoint, the fact that he could just blow by Blake Wesley, guy who was a first-round pick, that's when I was like, okay, Reese is somebody to really look at here. So
this is when I talk about a point guard that you want running the show, or a guard running the show, a guy like Reese is what comes to mind. He's tough at the point of attack defensively. He doesn't make a lot of bad decisions with the ball. He gets others involved. He can space the court, so he's not a complete liability. Even though he's not a great offensive weapon, he shoots well enough to where you have to respect him, and he competes. These are the types of guys you want running the show for a team. Like, this is the type of player that I believe that if you were to swap a Reese Beekman for an RJ or a Caleb Love, for example, on that UNC team like we were talking about, that team is so much better. Not saying individually one's better than the other, but like, that's the type of player Reese Beekman is. And this is the type of player that wins you college basketball games. Because there's going to be a game in March, or a game in a conference tournament, or just a close game in general. This guy's going to run the show, set up your offense. He's going to take a charge, steal a ball, hit a big 3, get somebody an open look, and you're going to win. I freaking love this kid, man. This guy's like in that Nembhard kind of point guard that I love. This guy, he fits that bill for me as a Nembhard-esque, tough, plays the game the right way, plays the position the right way. I think point guard is the most like twisted, distorted position in basketball today. Like, I don't think people realize what the actual intent of that position is supposed to be, or designed was. Now it's, your point guard's got to score 25 points a game and shoot from 3. I'm like, no, my point guard's got to be a threat on offense, but he's got to be able to run my offense and not get killed at the point of attack on defense. Right. Big fan of this kid.
Yep. And he's also, unlike, Nembhard, he's decent size. He's not huge, but 6'3", that's bigger than Chris Paul. So all right, so the next guy on our list is somebody I've had my eye on ever since he was a freshman, but he's now a senior, and I always thought he had the potential to be a 3-and-D guy. Finally, the 3 is coming along. He was always like looming in the 33% range. This year, shooting at 52% from 3 on about 3.5 attempts per game. Now, I will say, this is Hakeem Hart, by the way, of Maryland. Hakeem's shot is a little funky. I definitely think that ultimately he's going to want to change his motion. But who's going to argue with him right now when he's making 52% of his threes? And he's one of the main reasons why Maryland is undefeated right now. He's averaging 14 points per game, 60% from the field, 87% for the foul line. He's always been an excellent free throw shooter. close to 5 rebounds a game, 2.1 assists, 1.2 steals, and only 0.9 turnovers per game. And this guy is like a 6'7", 6'8" wing. So I mean that's really good size for a wing, and he's a good defender and a versatile defender who can defend at that size, and with his athleticism can defend multiple positions. So I think not many people are talking about Hakeem Hart, but I think by the end of the year they will be. The next guy is Brendan Carlson from Utah.
12.
And we talked about him last year, actually, with our guest, goodness gracious, Bruce Pascoe. We were talking last year about potential prospects that might emerge in the Pac-10, and I brought up Brendan Carlson, which actually surprised Bruce at the time, but he's a 7-foot center, and he's now a senior, but he's just, I don't know, I think his numbers have always been good, but it's this year, he's just, actually his numbers right now are about the same as last year, but to see him, he was the main reason I thought why Utah defeated Arizona.
Oh, absolutely. He carried them. He was the best. He was the best player for Utah in that Arizona game by far.
Right.
By far. Just looking at again, I ended up not watching that game because I thought it was going to be a walkover. But looking at the box score, he played really well.
Right. I think he made 5 threes, and how many points did he have?
He had 24, I think, or something like that.
Right.
What I like about Carlson, and I remember him from last year having been a Pac-12 guy, and was like, this guy's not getting a lot of looks, and I get it, like 7 foot, not a super athlete, like, there's always that kind of stigma of like, is this guy going to be able to play at the next level? Also
a little on the skinny side, but he's put on muscle now. He's put on muscle this year.
Looks way more filled out this year. I'm like looking him up right now just to kind of see. I remember last year being like, this guy can really play. No one's talking about him. I get it. It's Utah. They're not a basketball school per se. But one thing I have to give credit for, and this is just looking at last year and this year, because I remember we had talked about him, is he has gotten better across the board. His 3-point percentage has jumped 12 points, and he's taking more across 9 games now. He's taking 3 a game, and he's at 43%, and that's a 9-game sample size. So I'm willing to buy some stock that this guy can shoot. Maybe not 43%.
Oh, he has a pretty shot. He has a
good shot. It's still early in the season, so he's only at 66% from the free throw line, but he shot 82% last year. So I'm willing to buy that. Okay, he's going to be in the 80s again, probably by the time the season's done. Solid rebounder at 7 a game, 1.4 assists. So, he's able to move the ball. And what I've always appreciated about my bigs, especially in college, is he's averaging 2.5 blocks a game, and he's only committing 2 fouls a game. And he's actually never had that many issues with fouls. Like last year, he averaged under 2 fouls a game. And so when you're 7 feet tall and you're contesting and blocking shots at a high clip like that, it's something I always appreciated about like Deron Holmes when we talked about him, is like being able to defend the rim, alter shots, block shots, and not foul is actually a skill. And when you have a 7-footer that can shoot, he can defend. I mean, that's the blueprint can he defend the rim and can he shoot? And Carlson's doing those things. And he has been for the last 2 years now. Yeah. Last 2 years he's been doing those things. So I'm going to definitely pay more attention, because he was a guy that like I would watch play against like a USC or a UCLA, like the big teams, and be like, oh wow, this guy's actually pretty good, but never really thought twice about it.
Yeah, it seemed like Utah's plan was to basically keep him on the perimeter and make sure that Tubelis and Ballo
had to come
out, and he nailed him. I think he was 5 for 8 in that game. And also, did some damage on the inside as well. So yeah. And the shot is not a fluke. It looks nice. So
yep. That free throw percentage will come up, and even if the 3 ball drops to 38% from a 7-footer, you're very happy with that. And that's a whole 5 percentage points he could drop off of his 3 ball by the end of the year, and you'd still be going, oh, this guy can stretch the court, this guy can play.
Yeah. The next guy I'm starting to believe is the Oscar Tshiebwe the poor man's Oscar Tshiebwe in college basketball.
That's a good way to put it.
Norchad Omier of Miami, the transfer from Arkansas State. He put up, we talked about him in our preseason special about his numbers, last year were just off the charts. And they have dropped, now that he's gone up a level in competition, but he's still putting up really nice numbers.
14-10.
Yeah, the guy's only 6'7", but he's very muscular, very solidly built, and he's just really putting tremendous rebounder. But he does other things as well. Shooting 66% from the field, averaging 14 points per game. He's 25% from three. He only takes an occasional three. 69% from the free throw line. Almost 10 rebounds per game. And 1.4 assists to 2.2 turnovers. Not crazy about those numbers, but 1.2 steals, 1 block per game. That's nice. Obviously, he's not a rim protector. He's more of a power forward type. And in Miami, they can't go 5 out this year with him, which they could do last year. But he does bring things that they didn't have last year, like a tremendous rebounder. So, yeah, and Miami's off to a fantastic start, and he's part of the reason why.
If they get those guards, if they can get the Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack situation really dialed in, which was something that I know personally I was high on, thinking that they'd have one of the best backcourts, if not maybe the best backcourt in the ACC, with a guy like this man in the middle doing all kind of the kind of dirty work. And I didn't see, Jordan Miller's playing really well for them too right now.
Yeah.
I believe he's their leading scorer.
Is he really?
I think him and Norchad actually are close. But this is a really talented team. And if they can just get the Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong thing figured out.
Right. Because they can put up 20 any night.
And you have a guy like this who's just, like you said, kind of a poor man's Oscar Tshiebwe, who's going to get you 10 rebounds and 10 points just off of hustle and, strength around the basket. And I don't love the 2.2 turnovers, but the 1.2 steals, 1 point block, he's impacting the game in a variety of ways. He gives you a legit, I wouldn't call him like an interior presence because he's not a deterrent at the rim, but a guy who's going to get in there and mix it up with the type of guard play you have with the Miller, Wong, Pack. This team, if they can figure it out, man, this team is going to be very good.
And I've actually watched them a lot this year, and the last couple of games, Pack is looking better.
Yeah, I watched them against I know they just beat who did they play before? They just beat the crap out of Louisville. But whoever they played before Louisville, I watched them play, and they looked good.
Yeah, I saw them play against UCF.
It was in between that. There was a game in between. They played somebody because I know they said they just beat the crap out of Louisville, but everybody is right now.
Right.
And I thought the team it was a good opponent. The team looked good. Miller played really well.
Rutgers.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, because it was another red. They looked really good. I think this team, I think this team is going to validate that Elite 8 run last year. If they can figure it out, this team has Elite 8 potential for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. It seems like they can't get Wong and Pack to hit on the same night.
Yeah. There's a night, though, it's going to happen where they both go for 20, and it's going to click, I feel like, and it might take them a couple more games. It might be once ACC plays in full swing, but it's going to happen. And even if it's not a consistent thing, they're scary because the nights both of them go for 20 and Norchad's pulling down 10 and 10 and Miller gives you 15. It's going to be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so now this is going to be painful for you.
Oh my God.
We're moving down to stock falling, and the reason, of course, we were higher on Timmy than most people. We had him late first round range. Dropped him down now to early second round range. All the things that he can do, but it became apparent to me in that Baylor game, and you watch them more than I do, but the thing, they couldn't get him the ball, but I couldn't solely put the blame on the guards because I felt like it was low post or nothing. And even when the way he was being played, he was going to have to come out to the high post and then do something from there. But even when he got the ball in the high post, he immediately drove down to the low post and tried to do his magic, which I don't know how many shot attempts he had in that game.
It's 6.
It's only 6.
Only 6, yeah.
Right. But my point being is, if they're not getting you the ball down there, then you got to make yourself available some other way and do some other things. And so, and then I dove in a little deeper and looked at his numbers. And right now, this year so far, now how many games have they played? 7, 8?
7 or 8, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's 7.
He's taken 11 jump shots of any kind, any distance, and made 2.
Yeah, he's made 1 3 against Purdue, and I think there's another jumper in there somewhere.
Okay. And then, I went even a little deeper, and I looked at his shooting range. So what I'm suggesting is, if they can't feed you into the post, you come out to the high post and you do something from there. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would mean, like a foul line jumper from the elbow, or, a jumper from the elbow, or maybe even a move where you don't go all the way, you maybe make a move and you do like a fadeaway, like a Dirk-like shot or something like that from like 10, 12 feet. Well, I looked at how many shots he's actually taken from the range of 10 to 18 feet this year. He's taken 14, which leads the team. 14. But he's only made 29%, which is the worst on the team from that range. So I'm just starting to wonder, as a pro player, does Drew Timme have enough to actually, his strength is scoring. Does he have enough else in his game to actually make it in the pros?
To play devil's advocate, and this has been the knock on Timme, is he's got to expand the range. And I do agree. I think that there has to be a counter move. We always say in the post, you got to have a counter move. You can't just throw the same hook or the same spin. You got to have a counter move. And in the post, he's got dozens of them. I will say the devil's advocate is, we mentioned the guards aren't always great about getting him the ball. And also, he does face so many double teams. Even when he's in the high, teams are swarming to the ball, that he's being forced to, he's not usually able to, like a Pete Nance, get the ball in the high post, turn and realize the defender's giving him, and just kind of rise up and shoot. There's always a defender on him because they are so afraid that he's going to turn. And if you give him even just a little space, he's going to put the ball on the deck and then hit you with a spin move either way. And that whole rabbit hole that it goes down. So I think that teams just are like, we are not going to let you give you any breathing room at all, because we know if you get any sort of head of steam towards the basket, we can't stop you. And then in turn, when I do watch him play, a lot of his jump shots, mid-range shots, the 3 ball tends to be open threes where a ball is batted out or something like that. It's a little bit different. But I feel that I see him shooting a lot of these contested fall-away jumpers because he's got 2 hands in his face or defenders are up on him. He's got to be able to hit those. I do agree. Just to be able to counter when teams are going to double him, or when he's playing those elite athletes. But I still think there's room for him. Stock falling, I do agree. His last 2 games haven't been great. Xavier, he passed the ball really well, which is a skill set I think people are just starting to come around to. And he's actually defending the rim pretty well this year, better than he has in the past. So I think we're seeing new wrinkles to his game, but he is a scorer. And if he can't score in a variety of ways, I just think if I'm Timme, I'm taking this WCC season as a chance to really hone and showcase my ability to score away from the basket. Yeah. Because he's going to be the best player on the court every time he steps on the court. And he damn near is even in these games. And he's going to have to showcase that ability. And I do believe it's there. I've seen enough touch. Again, I go back to the Memphis game when he was hitting jumpers, he was ripping through one dribble pull-ups on guys like Jalen Duren, who we had high as a defender. So the talent is there. He scored really well against Evan Mobley 2 tournaments ago and gave him 23 in the tournament with a variety of little mid-range shots. So I think it's there. I just think teams, especially this year, knowing the Zags don't have that Chet Holmgren or that Suggs or that Kispert, that other guy who can really punish, that can punish you. They've spent so much of the seasons like kind of, all right, Timmy, get your 15 to 25, and hopefully someone else comes along for the ride. I think teams are so keyed in on him this year, like, you're not beating us, that he's either forcing the issue to bad shots, or he's becoming so reliant of like, I have to get my 20 for us to be competitive, so I have to do it. I have to go to my bread and butter for us to stay competitive. It's not an excuse. He needs to expand his range, and I think he just needs to become more comfortable in that. But I also think the way teams are playing him and the fact that like 6 shots against Baylor as a big is more of an indictment on the guards to me than it is on him, because he doesn't bring the ball up. He's relying on someone else getting him, even if he's in the high post or if he's on the block, getting the ball. But I do agree, like I look at against Purdue and Xavier where he took 15 and 16 shots respectively. It was a lot of at the basket or nothing at all. And great European profile. If he decides to maybe go play overseas, he'll be a force. But at the next level in the NBA, it will raise questions. But I'm not out on Timmy being able to showcase it.
He could be a millionaire playing for Real Madrid.
I think he's going to write. I'm hoping he showcases that skill set when WCC play comes around. And I believe he's going to. He's already taken more threes this year. He's taken a 3 in a good chunk of the games they've been in. He's shooting. It's not great percentages, but he's doing it versus, last couple seasons, he would only shoot if he was left wide open. So it's my guy.
Remember Wisconsin's Ethan Happ?
Yes.
Ethan didn't even bother to try G League or anything. He just went straight to Europe, and he's been killing it the last time I looked.
And if Timmy would decide to go overseas and play in Europe, he'd automatically go and be a top-tier player. And like you said, would be make millions, and in the span of a couple of years, be one of the best players in Europe. Right. I really do think he's that good.
Oh,
it's more of it's a fit thing. I don't think it's a talent thing.
Right.
Unfortunately, when you talk about the NBA.
Right. Exactly. So the next guys on Stop Falling both play for the same team. And I swear to God that there's got to be, maybe it's the building. You know how they say some buildings they're good to shoot in because of the lighting, or they have soft rims. Maybe it's the building. Maybe Tennessee needs to build a new arena, or maybe it's Rick Barnes. I don't know. Or maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but Tennessee has come out shooting pretty badly, with the exception of Josiah James, who has been hurt for like half the season and only played in 4 games so far, and Tyreek Key, who they brought in from Indiana State as a transfer. He's hitting about 39%. But Santiago Vescovi, who we had on the show and we love, but he was one of the best shooters in the country last year, and he's only making 32% of his shots, only shooting from deep, and only shooting 35% from the field. And as equally as disappointing, if not maybe more, is Zakai Ziegler. Yeah. He really looked fantastic last year as Kennedy Chandler's backup, but now that he's playing, starters minutes, he's only shooting 34% from the floor, 32% from deep. And the other thing I'm a little disappointed here, and this is partly because Vescovi does a lot of the ball handling as well, but he only has 3.5 assists per game to 2.5 turnovers. Mm-hmm. Very similar numbers to Vescovi, by the way, 3.4 and 2.4. Yeah. These guys, if Tennessee is going to be a Final Four team that you and I both predicted, these guys need to get going. They need to start shooting, and they need to cut back on the turnovers. We've seen Vescovi do it before, so I'm not too worried about him. I am worried about Ziegler. I've heard, many people say like he's the best shooter on the team, but this doesn't show up in the games. Well, I
don't care if you
exactly.
I'm the best shooter at the rec league. Just so you guys know, if anyone's curious, I'm the best shooter at the rec league when it's empty at 10 o'clock after I get a lift in. I'm the best shooter. No, all joking aside, it doesn't matter.
You're always lobbying to get on our draft board. Always.
So Zakai, in his defense, the last 3 games, their shooting has definitely picked up. I know they played Alcorn.
I know. We talked about this. Yeah.
And and even against Kansas, his 3 balls last 3 games have been really good. He's had a horrid shooting start for the season. His first 5 games were awful. So the turnovers are still an issue. He's still the last couple games had like 3 turnovers pretty like consistently. I think with Vescovi, and this goes back to something that we talked about when he was on the show, and we asked him, "Oh, what else are you going to be at? What are you looking to add to your repertoire?" And he's like, "Shooting." It was more or less the answer he gave us.
Yeah.
And I think both you and I, Rich, were like, well, Sam, we know you can do that. The last 3 years, you've been a great shooter. You came in as a great shooter. You were 36% on 5.5 a game as a freshman. The problem I think he's having is he was taking 7.2 threes a game last year.
Now he's taking 9 this year.
He's taking 9. If you look, he's actually hitting the same amount of threes a game. He's hitting, we'll call it's 2.9. He's hitting 3. We'll call it 3. He's hitting 3 a game this year. He hit the exact same amount last year. The problem is he's become even more reliant on the 3 ball. He was taking 10 shots a game last year, 7 of which were from 3. Now he's taking 11 shots a game, but 9 of which are from 3. And so the problem is when you're so reliant, everything is tied to the 3 ball, which is the hardest shot to hit. No matter how good of a shooter you are, it's still the most difficult in terms of range, of a hands in your face. There's a lot that goes into that shot. And it's like, you can't expect to shoot at that. Basically, have your entire offense come from 3.
No, they'll run you off the line.
Yeah,
they won't leave you. They won't leave you like they did in their NCAA loss last year to Michigan. Michigan never left him alone.
You are putting a man on him and going, I do not care. Just stay there because he's not going to do anything else. And as good of a shooter as he is, you have tied yourself exclusively to that shot. And teams know that. And a good team, I'm taking my best defender, not my best defender, but maybe like my most athletic defender, just an athlete, sticking him on Santiago, who's, I think, more athletic than he gets credit for. He's scrappy.
Oh, yeah.
But he's still 6'3". And I'm putting him on and I go, do not leave. Just stay there. It's almost not a box in one, but like almost kind of how I'm putting someone on you and you're just, any shot you take is going to be contested.
That's exactly what Michigan did.
And again, he was a little bit better against McNeese. I know he's hurt. He didn't play against Alcorn, and I think he's out for their next game, they've said, which doesn't help because shooters, he needs the reps.
He did pick it up in the win over Kansas.
Yes. So I'm looking at this. He took 13 shots against McNeese. 12 of them were from 3.
Wow.
Against Kansas, he took 16 shots. 14 of them were from 3. And it's just like, he is to what I've watched, he's the most one-dimensional scorer in college. You want to talk about Timmy's in the post? Santiago Vescovi is the most one-dimensional scorer, and I get it, like he's really good at it, but it's almost like, dude, if you just dialed back 1 3 a game, just 1, and your percentage would jump astronomically, like just 1 attempt. If he gets back to 7 attempts from 3, but he's given 3 or 4 mid-range jumpers or attacks to the basket, this guy's efficiency would go through the roof, and it would force defenders.
That makes me wonder, because Tennessee almost always has 2 bigs out there. I wonder if it's too crowded for these guys to get in the lane. It never seemed to be for Kennedy Chandler. It didn't even seem to be that way for Ziegler last year. Right. I probably haven't studied how they're playing offense this year. But, they have Julian Phillips, who's mostly an inside guy. They have Kamwa, who's mostly an inside guy. And they have
Euros is an inside guy.
Right. It's probably something we should take a look at, see how if are there any driving lanes. But I'm pretty sure there is, because Kennedy Chandler had no problem getting to the rim last year.
I think these 2 guys are going to be okay long term, because I really do believe that we've seen it. I've seen Vescovi be arguably the best shooter in the country. I've seen Ziegler be explosive and shifty and hit from 3. He's been shooting better the last couple of games. So I think long term they'll be fine. But the problem is, and we saw it, play this one-dimensional in big games against good coaches, against better teams consistently, they're going to catch you. They're going to force you into an off night. And when Vescovi and Ziegler are so important to their team, it's not like these are, a bench. Vescovi's just a bench guy who comes in, plays 10 minutes, hooks up 2 or 3 threes a game. And gets like, this is a guy who drives this team. He is averaging almost 3 steals a game, I believe. So he's impacting the game in other ways, but I that's my worry, is that the same fate awaits them in the tournament, where they're going to run into a well-coached team with the perimeter athletes, and they're just going to take him out of the game. They're going to take Ziegler out of the game, and there's not going to be enough firepower on the Vols roster to survive that kind of an absence.
So another player who is playing for a team that we both predicted to be in the Final Four, who's also hasn't made the steps forward that we would have expected from him, is R.J. Davis of North Carolina. This guy is supposed to be the floor general for UNC. And, we knew just from last year's tournament run what a great, shot creator he is, and his ability to hit really difficult shots, on the move. And also make some, really great finishes at the rim. But this year, not only is he just shooting 40% from the field and 26% from deep, but he's only averaging 2.8 assists as
the 2 turnovers.
The 2 turnovers per game as the team's lead guard. That has to see. Love, we know, is a combo guard who shoot first. And we expected that to stay that way.
Yep.
But Davis is the one we expected to take a few less shots and be more of a distributor this year. Hasn't happened yet. And he's not shooting. He's not making the shots either. Yeah. So I think RJ, I heard somebody say at the beginning of the year he was the best player on North Carolina's team. And I raised my eyebrows. And to me right now, he's probably the player that's killing them the most.
He is hurting them the most, and I don't think it's close. Again, I've made this reference about this team as a whole, but it goes back to the UCLA thing. Johnny Juzang had that monster run, and all of a sudden started skyrocketing on people's draft boards, and people talking about he might be one of the best combo, two guards in the country. Comes back and he's just and he's okay. He's okay. Right. And I think RJ, he's 6 feet. He's 6 feet tall. Like, if he's not going to be willing to embrace the playmaking kind of on ball role, can you really expect a 6-foot guard in the ACC with these expectations to constantly be pouring in points at that high of a volume? Could he get hot and could he do a 4 or 5 game stretch like he did in the tournament where he's giving you 20 points and he's hitting follow-away threes and he's getting to the basket? Absolutely. He's a talented basketball player. But to expect over the course of a season, this guy at 6 feet tall, who never really has been a playmaker, to all of a sudden become just this dynamic force, I think we're seeing what RJ Davis is. And that's a score-first guard who can get hot, but I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm out on him as a player, because he could go on a 6-game stretch in the middle of January and February and drag this team into the tournament and, just go on a run. But maybe he's just okay. And the whole talk of he's the best player on the team is he's just okay. Because right now I take Pete Nance over him, as the transfer. I think he's playing better. I think Caleb Love is.
I think whoever said I think that was who's the former Virginia Tech coach that's on ESPN, works with LaFonso Ellis. Seth Greenberg. I think it was Seth Greenberg, and I think what he should have said was he's not the best player on this team, the most important player on this team.
Yeah. And he could be the most dynamic on any given night. But...
Well, I don't know. I don't. Love is pretty darn dynamic too. But
I'm talking about any given night, though. Right. RJ could have a game where he does go for 25, and you're just like, holy crap! Like, he wins you a game. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're just seeing the type of player that RJ is, which is a not overly efficient small guard who isn't really a playmaker and is high usage, high volume, and high risk, high reward type of player.
Right. So next guy you probably don't want to have on this list either, and that's Stanford.
He deserves to be there.
Harrison Ingram, and I've seen him play twice this year, 2 games where they desperately needed his offense. That was against UCLA and against Wisconsin. And in those games, both of those games, he scored exactly 6 points. Yep. 6 points. This is from a 5-star guy who struggled somewhat last year, and I thought, he was a little too heavy and needed to trim down to become more explosive. And his numbers, if anything, this year. Now, admittedly, Stanford has played a pretty tough schedule.
They
haven't played a lot of nobodies. They've played, everybody they've played has been pretty much, except for I think Cal Poly, has been somebody. Decent teams.
Yeah.
But his numbers right now, and that's the way it's going to be from here on out, because Pac-12 play is kicking in. But his numbers have actually decreased in many departments. He's only averaging 10.1 points per game, shooting 36% from the field, 24% from 3, only getting 4.9 rebounds. That last year was 6.7. His assists have bumped up, and that's a nice number, 3.2. But he almost also averaging 3 turnovers a game.
Yeah.
His blocks and steals both under 0.8 per game. Just nothing that's really encouraging here except for the 3.2 assists. And like I said, when they desperately needed his offense, it's not like other guys are scoring and he's just not getting the opportunities. They need him, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, I remember this is a player that when I first saw him and I heard, and this was last season, so I wasn't working at Stanford, but I'm from the area, and I heard that Stanford landed a 5-star prospect, and I went when they finally lifted some COVID stuff. I was able to go see him live. He actually had a really nice start to his season. He was a big factor. He played Isaiah Mobley when USC was undefeated early in the year, and Stanford knocked him off. He had like a 24-point, 11 rebound double-double. He had some great games, and I kind of justified the decrease in production, the decrease in efficiency as the season went on, is he's hitting that freshman wall. The team wasn't super talented. He was clearly the best player on the team, and that's hard to do as a true freshman. COVID regulations have been super tough on Stanford, so I know his preseason training and practicing schedule was probably super messed up. But now, having seen that kind of ending struggles to the season into the start of this season, I'm just really worried. There are pieces on this team. I'm not saying Stanford's championship contender by no means, but I think as a whole, there's some pieces to this team that are decent, and the fact that he can't separate himself at all is problematic. I mean, at least give me the rebounding, man. Like, his numbers are literally, in terms of shots taken, like everything is pretty much across the board the same or worse. There's not one thing he's doing better. I could forgive he was inefficient, but he was pulling down 9 rebounds a game, was dishing out 6 assists, and he was trying to figure out the offense. I get it. Sometimes shots come and go. That's what we've been talking about with some of the top players in the country, but I'm seeing no growth in his game. I mean, none. And yes, they played a tough schedule, but for a guy that, if you're a 5-star recruit, and I'm assuming he was at the combine, I know he tested. I don't know if he scrimmaged, but he tested the combine. So clearly the NBA is on your brain. You have to be able to elevate. UCLA is not world beaters. They're not. I mean, you played this UCLA team with the exception of Amari Bailey for the most part last year. Hawkins is back. Tiger Campbell's back. You lost to ASU, who they weren't great last year. I mean, they were at best in the Pac-12. They were middle of the Pac-12 team. You got to play San Diego State, test yourself against a good team that has played some high competition. Not really a factor in that game. His only game this year where he's shown at all any sort of, growth was against Ole Miss, and they still lost.
Right.
He had a nice game against Ole Miss. I know I'm being harsh, but this is like, dude, you have to show growth. You have to show you came back because you weren't ready. And I'm seeing he looks worse.
I mean, even if you're not thinking about the NBA, You know,
Yeah.
you should make strides from one year to the next.
Yep. He literally in all facets of the game was worse. I mean, I'm looking at his game log from last year, and his first 3 games to start the season, they weren't world beaters. He had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 19.6 rebounds, 19 points, 11. Wasn't great against Baylor, but he had a good game against Oregon. He played Texas, and he had 15.7 rebounds. Like I said, knocked off USC when they were undefeated and went for 21 and 10. Like, there's games in here where I'm like, oh, okay, like I see it. I see him, and then he hit the wall. And I was like, I was kind of trying to forgive him. I was like, okay, you kind of hit the wall. In his last, 8 games, he scored in double digits, 1 time. But I was like, I get it. It's hard. It's a long season. But
I'm actually thinking that something's going on. And I really think that if this team continues to play like it has been, I think Jarrett Hass is gone.
It wouldn't surprise me.
The coach.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
And I also think that, I know that Ingram is better than this.
Oh, I've seen. I just listed off his games last year. His last game last year, which I watched, I didn't see it live because it was in the tournament, which I think was in Vegas. Might be mixing up the WCC one, but it was against number 2 Arizona, and he had been playing horrible. He had his February, early March was awful. And he had completely fallen off draft boards in terms of I was like, if he does go, which he shouldn't, he'd be a 2nd round guy at this point. And he came out and he had 16 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He was 54% from the field. He shot 2 for 3 from 3. And I was like, okay, that's great momentum to go into next year. You played arguably the best team in the country, played a good game on a neutral court. And I was like, you know what? 16, 6, and 4. Those are pretty good benchmarks. That should be where he's at next year as a player. And he's not even close to that.
No.
And that's worrisome.
Yep. All right. So another 5-star guy on our list is Musa Cisse, who plays at Oklahoma State, transferred from Memphis. He played after his freshman year at Memphis, before he transferred to OK State, he went to the G League Elite Camp and played in some games. And I was really impressed with his efficiency and his foot speed. And I was thinking, here's a guy that probably could actually be a switchable defender. I mean, not, you don't want him on the small point guards, but somebody who wouldn't be a total liability, that he showed enough athleticism and speed and quickness that I thought he could be a decent defending big.
There was a little Coloco-ness to him, I guess.
Right.
Not as good. He's not as good as Coloco, but there's that little bit of okay.
But at the same time, he's always been a great rebounder and shot blocker. Yeah. And this year, and very efficient around the rim. And this year he's doing that. 62% from the field, 10.5 rebounds a game, 3.3 blocks per game. What's not to like? Well, still not hitting any threes. And what's really concerning me, and this might sound funny, but right now he's shooting 32% from the free throw line. And that's just not going to cut it. Believe it or not, you can't expect to have a long any kind of a career in the NBA, making that, unless they're not going to give you the ball, because people will just foul you on purpose if you're only making 31 out of 3 foul shots. And so, again, is guy still in our top 100 because he's an amazing rebounder and shot blocker and has a lot of athleticism, but he's got to pick it up at least at the free throw line. Because can you imagine if this guy was shooting 67% from the foul line and maybe upped his offense to maybe 12 a game, with the rest of those numbers?
People would be talking first round pick.
Right.
Like I said, they're Coloco-esque in that nobody was looking at Coloco like an offensive force, but you're like, he gives you 12 a game off of hustle, putback. He was I think a 70%, 71% free throw shooter. Gave you 10 rebounds and blocked 2 shots a game. And you're like, okay, there's my Clint Capella for the next 8 years.
Exactly.
I'm good with that.
Exactly. Right. Good point. All right. So, and last on our stock falling list is a Pac-10 guy. And, it's Pella Larson. He's a junior at Arizona. Very steady player. and he was at the bottom of our top 200. But and there are some of his numbers that are better this year, and some of his numbers that are not as good. But the thing that's concerned me is that he's always been a steady defender and kind of a do everything glue guy. But he's not making the shots this year, and that was his strong selling point. You can't be a 3-and-D guy, because I don't think he's an elite defender, but I think he's a good defender. I think he's a good defender, right? And but he needs to make about 40% of his threes to be in the draft discussion, and right now he's making 27%. So he just fell out of our top 200. So again, he's having a solid year, and maybe he'll reemerge in our top 200 once he picks it up. But right now, last year he only hit 36%, so that's still not good enough. It was only his freshman year at Utah where he hit 46% when he first caught our eye, and we're like, we got a 3-and-D guy on our hands. But ever since then, the numbers keep going down.
Well, I think that's the Arizona effect too. Of last year he's on a team with Kirk Risa, Tabellis, Koloko, Ben Matherin, who shout out to us for saying we were all high on him. And I know we all caved and gave Paolo the inside track on Rookie of the Year, but it might be Matherin coming in hot. But we were close. We all said he was the runner-up. So right. I think part of it is he's not good enough to separate himself from a Tabellis, from a Kirk Risa, to establish himself. And I will say this, I'm looking at our stock falling guys, and I'm pretty confident that all of them have the potential to, or straight up better than the way they're playing right now. There's none of these guys that I'm all the way out on. Right. Pele's up there too. Right. I really think that the problem is I just don't know if he's ever going to, and maybe it's a mindset, maybe he's just not interested in that, but I don't know if he's ever going to be able to take the reins and get himself into that 11 points per game, 38% from shooting. I mean, all of his numbers across the board have just been like you said, he's okay. And at some point, he's in his third year. You're playing on a good team. Ben Matherin, who was the guy sucking up a lot of the wing offense, is now gone. The offense is running more through, Tabellis at the power forward. I would have liked to see Pele maybe pick up some of the scoring slack along the perimeter. And you're like, okay, you went from averaging 7 points a game to 9 points a game. You're making one more shot a game, but your three balls down to almost 10%. Again, none of these guys I'm out on. And I think that a lot of these guys, particularly looking at Musa, there's still a path, or Ingram, for these guys to turn it around and maybe even make some noise on an NBA board at some point. But a lot of basketball left. But yes. We're not writing any of the. We're never writing anybody off, nor are we crowning anyone. Right. Typically in stock rising or stock falling, we're just saying an awareness thing. Yeah. It's just we're just saying this is the direction things are going right now. All right. So it's time to rattle off some predictions. Wow. That's a lot of games. You did. All I can say is you did better than Mav did week 1. You were 7-10. Mav week 1 was 2-5. You were 7-10 last week. I went 11-6. How can that be? But I guess some of the ones, I think we differed on 6. Anyway, so now for the season, I'm 14-10. So, Drew, you got to pick up your game here. I took some risky flyers. Like I said, I took Michigan over Kentucky. And some you made with your heart. Yeah, I took the Zags because that's my team. I don't pick against. I took Michigan over Kentucky because I can't stand Calipari, and that game was actually pretty competitive. They could have done it. Yeah. It wasn't I don't think there was any game besides the Marquette Baylor game that I was way off on. That one, might have to reevaluate after that one. All right, here we go. The first two are at the Garden in the Jimmy V Classic tomorrow night. That's Illinois versus Texas. Is game 1. I'm gonna go with Texas. They're playing like arguably the best team in the country right now. Illinois has been pretty solid, but I gotta go Texas. I agree.
Iowa versus Duke in the game 2.
I think I'm going to go Duke. I feel Duke has enough to throw at
Keegan
Murray,
or not Keegan,
Chris Murray.
Murray.
To he's the driving force of that team, and when he's been off, they've struggled, and I think they have enough between Flabowski, between Lively to throw at him.
Yeah, and I'm also not sold on Iowa's defense. They're kind of a real all offense type of team. All right, so we have undefeated Maryland at Wisconsin.
I'll roll with Maryland. They've surprised me this year. Wisconsin has also been actually pretty surprising. They have some pretty convincing wins this year, and even some pretty competitive losses. But I think I'm gonna go with Maryland. Or is it at Wisconsin?
It is at Wisconsin.
I'm gonna go with Maryland. Wisconsin's been every game they've been in has been super close, and I think this is one where the better team's it's gonna be a close game. And the better team is gonna execute and win.
I agree. So far we're right on par. All right, now we have Dayton. By the way, the Flyers won both of their games this week, and Mongolian Mike led the team in both games in assists, 8 each game.
8, yep.
Each game. So we have Dayton at Virginia Tech, who just knocked off North Carolina yesterday.
I'm gonna go with Virginia Tech. I know I'm a big fan of Dayton and I like the players, but I just haven't seen it consistently from them.
Right.
And
their guards are still hurt.
They're missing 2 of their best start. Yeah, I gotta go Virginia Tech.
Okay, so we agree there. So now we have undefeated UConn at Florida.
UConn, from what I've seen, from what I've been hearing, has been arguably the best team in the country.
Wow.
UConn.
Look at us. We are not disagreeing on anything so far. I agree. UConn. All right. Rutgers at Ohio State.
I'm gonna go Rutgers on this one. I haven't seen a lot of Ohio State, and to be honest, this is a game where I've seen Rutgers play twice. I've only seen Ohio State play once when they lost on the Maui. So I'm going to go with Rutgers just because I'm a little bit more familiar. I don't know what to expect from Ohio State.
I'm going with Ohio State. Rutgers is a different team when they're on the road. Iowa State at Iowa. So we have Iowa. Iowa's on this list 3 times. What a week for them. Wow.
Yeah, geez. I like what I've seen from Iowa State. I'm going to go with Iowa State. I like what I've seen from the Cyclones this year. They weren't a team I expected too much from, but I like what I've seen. I'm going to go with Iowa State.
This is offense versus defense. I'm going to go with offense. I'm going to go with Iowa.
Defense travels.
Well, I don't think I picked an Iowa State game right yet this year. I always go against them, and they usually win. So, all right. So now we have Washington at Gonzaga, and Washington is a surprising 7-2, and they play that annoying Syracuse zone defense.
Am I picking with my heart? Yes. But in my defense, I'm also going to take a team that I still think is really talented, a team that I think is going to get this thing figured out. And while playing a zone is always a pain in the ass at any level, and requires shooting, it's at home. The Zags play extremely well at home, and the Zags have shooters. They just need to execute. I know Strother can hit from 40% any given game. I know Malachi can. I know Hickman can even hit from 3. I know Bolton can. I'm going to go with the Zags at home. They get enough shooting from the guards to win despite a zone defensive scheme.
I agree. I think Timmy bounces back in a big way in this one.
Yeah.
All right. Arkansas versus Oklahoma in Tulsa. So somewhat of a neutral court.
Yeah. I'm going to go Arkansas, man. I mean, it's only more time for Nick Smith to get right. We talked about a lot of their players. This team is loaded with young talent, but between Ricky Council and I always forget his first name, but Brazil, their forward, they've got enough.
Trevin.
Yeah, they got enough veteran leadership there to kind of help.
This team Trayvon. It's Trayvon.
Yeah, it's Trayvon Brazil.
Right.
Between those two plus the 3 freshmen, this team is stacked. Oklahoma's had played some pretty competitive games recently, but Arkansas has.
I mean, Oklahoma's okay, and they're going to win some games, but yeah, I don't think they match up to Arkansas.
Yeah.
All right, this one's a tough one. NC State at Miami of Florida.
I'm gonna go Miami. We talked about their team a little bit here. Their guard play is slowly getting better, and when it hits, and maybe this is a game it does, you can argue they might have the best guard play, some of the best guard play in the country. I'm gonna go with Miami.
I agree. I think our boy Norchad Omier might be the difference in this game. Both teams have excellent guards. So and they all have 3 excellent guards. So yeah. All right. Alabama at Houston.
I'm gonna go with Houston. They're number 1 for a reason. Do they play the prettiest brand of basketball? No, but it works. It travels, and that team, man, they are looking for a fight. I always call it chaos ball, and the announcers during their St. Mary's game was calling it chaos ball, and I'm like, how do I not have a job? I've been calling it that for 2 years now, and this guy just steals my thought through the TV. But no, the Houston advantage is this: they are going to force you to play their way. You might be able to get hot. But they are going to impose their will in this game to some capacity because of the style of basketball. And I said it earlier, defense travels. And I'm a Kelvin Sampson guy. That might be my favorite coach in college basketball. So I'm rolling with Houston.
I'm going to go with Alabama. I wasn't too impressed with the way Houston's offense looked against St. Mary's. They just don't seem to be clicking yet. And so I'm going to go with the upset there. St. Mary's versus San Diego State in Phoenix.
I'm going to take St. Mary's in this game because while the offense at Houston didn't look great, I give credit to the St. Mary's defense, which is always dialed in. They play basketball in a very kind of, I guess you could say, old-fashioned, boring kind of way. But they move the ball, they play the right way, they defend. San Diego State, who's a team that I have been high on, I really do like, but I just worry that if this is going to be a defensive battle, and I think St. Mary's plays basketball in a just better way to handle a good defensive match. Like, I feel like San Diego State is so dependent on those 2 guards, and against a really tough defensive matchup, I could see those guards not scoring very efficiently. St. Mary's is going to find ways throughout that game to manufacture good looks. And a big fan of Aiden Mahaney. Their freshman guard.
Yes.
My brother actually played against him in high school, so I've seen that kid since he was 14, 15 years old. Hell of a player. Did not expect him to be this good at the college level already. So I'm going to take St. Mary's.
All right. I'm going to go with San Diego State, but I don't have a real good reason other than I think potentially they have more offensive firepower.
Yeah, the talent is better on San Diego State, but I think the team – on a neutral court, St. Mary's, they impressed me against Houston. Right. And I think that's momentum that they can carry into this game.
And one of the most hated rivalries in college basketball, which seems like every other year there's a brawl in this game. That's Xavier at Cincinnati. They're literally like 3 miles apart in the city of Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, believe it or not, is actually having a decent year.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Xavier. I mean, part of it is I've seen Xavier play now multiple times. They played a pretty tough schedule. They played my Zags tough. I haven't seen Cincinnati play other than a couple highlights here and there. But I think Xavier's battle-tested. They've played a tough schedule. They've looked good in every game I've watched, and it is a rivalry game. And, yes, it's an away game, but, I mean, you said they're so close. I don't necessarily know how much that factors in. You're probably going to have fans from both schools. I'm going with Xavier.
Yeah. Agreed. I'm going with Xavier as well. All right. Kansas against, are you ready for this? Undefeated Missouri.
Oh, Missouri.
At Missouri.
I have not followed Missouri at all, to be honest. I saw they haven't really played anybody of note. They
have 2 guys on our draft board. one is not playing that much. He's a transfer.
Right.
So we're basing that on previous years.
I'm gonna go Kansas. Part of this is a familiarity take. The other part is I think Kansas at the end of the day, they're two guys in Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say they're probably better than the two guys from Missouri. And Missouri's undefeated, but
yeah,
I've said it all year. Kansas is overrated, but I think Kansas is the better team.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not overly impressed with Kansas, but I think they'll have enough here. The next one is on a neutral site, and it's a big one. Arizona versus Indiana in Las Vegas.
I'm going to go with Arizona. I think Arizona just has more weapons. They have more ways to beat you. I think Indiana is very much so the Trace Jackson Davis show, which is not a bad show to be at, but on a neutral site, it is still West Coast. So I would just imagine Arizona is a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
Hell, it's in the desert, so they have that going for them. There's just more ways for them to beat you. I'm going to go Arizona.
I agree completely for the same reasons. All right. This is an old rivalry game. Marquette at Notre Dame.
I'm going to go with Notre Dame. Like I said, we've seen it with Notre Dame shooting. They didn't beat Syracuse as I predicted, but they came out. Who did they just beat?
Michigan State.
So they didn't beat. They flip flopped. I thought they beat Syracuse because of the shooting, and they didn't.
Right, and they should have. They should have beat Syracuse, but the zone really seemed to throw them out of whack. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Notre Dame because shooting is the ultimate X factor in college and basketball. Period. They do it really well, and again, they did just come off a good win against Michigan State.
Yeah, Marquette might be a tournament team, and I think Notre Dame is a tournament team, and Notre Dame's home, so I got to give them the edge.
Yep.
All right, so the next game up is another doozy. Maryland not at Tennessee versus Tennessee in Brooklyn.
Interesting. So if anything, I'm still gonna go. Again, I haven't seen Maryland play enough to concretely put my own stamp on how good they are. I've seen Tennessee, and despite the guards' woes, they have been playing well, like as a unit,
or at least better.
Better. So I'm going to go with Tennessee to keep the ball rolling, and they pick up a big win here for the resume.
Yeah,
I'll go with Tennessee.
Again, I agree. Wow, we agree way too much this week. All right.
Maryland could beat them, but I think Tennessee's got the talent.
Yes, I agree. And and Maryland's going through a tough stretch too, Yeah. So, all right, last game, and Iowa's third game on our chart. We have Wisconsin at Iowa, another offense versus defense game.
Man, I'm not really sold on Iowa. I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I like what Murray does as an individual, but I just don't really believe in Iowa as a unit. And Wisconsin, at least to my eye test, has played every game this year against good competition, close. And even if they've lost, like when they did to Kansas, it was a 1-point loss in overtime.
Right.
They lost to Wake Forest, which I thought they would have won, but it was a 3-point loss. They beat Marquette. Like they're battle tested. Their last 5 games have come against good teams. Like I said, they've either won or they've lost by 1 possession or less. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Wisconsin. I'm just not sold on Iowa.
Yep. I'm not sold on either team yet completely. I think they're good teams, but I don't think they're great teams. But the reason why I definitely like Wisconsin here is this is Iowa's third big game in 1 week. That rarely happens in college basketball. It's usually only 2 games a week. So, yeah, I got to go with Wisconsin. All right. So, mailbag. We have our leftover question from last week, and we have one new question. Steven says, I have heard you mention it a few times, and I have to ask, why in the world would you have a draft board that has 900 plus players? Well, since I handle the draft board, I'll answer this as quickly as possible. Number one, it allows you to put things in perspective. So I don't want to go into detail, but it basically allows you to relatively compare. But the major reason is is we do it because we also do some work for European teams. And so you can't really advise them if you're only looking at the top 80 players in college basketball, because none of those guys will go to Europe. They're going to go to the NBA or the G League. So that's why. But it also makes it easier to relatively compare players, which is a little more difficult to explain, but I hope that answers your question. All right. So this is our leftover question from Rhonda from last week. And it says, and this is a fun question. It says, can you guys name all of the schools with the following nicknames? All right, so I gotta find the email with the answers. Drew, I hope you didn't cheat.
I didn't. So for those out there, I have a slight advantage in this only because with work, I've been monitoring the transfer portal, and given that FCS football has ended, and those were some of the weird mascots come from. I've actually seen some of these over the last week, believe it or not. There's still like 2 or 3 on this list that I have absolutely no idea what that is.
Right, so I found it. All right, so I have the one with the answers. All right, so you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I got the email with the answers. All right, Horned Frogs. TCU, right? Leathernecks.
That is, I actually know this one because there's a kid. Western Illinois.
Oh, wow!
So it's actually a bulldog for a logo, which is why it's kind of interesting.
Huh. I was going to say something like Wolford or something like that.
No,
I wouldn't know, but we're scoring ourselves collectively. Sun Devils, Arizona State. Mean Green is North Texas. Jaspers. I don't know Jaspers. I think that's Manhattan.
That might be. I don't know Jaspers.
I think that's Manhattan. All right. Hoyas is Georgetown. Blue Hose. I have no clue.
No clue who Blue Hose is.
The Toros.
That is San Diego.
UC San Diego, or
it's not. No, so UC is the Tritons. SDSU is the Aztecs. This is San Diego. This is the WCC San Diego? One. No, UC San Diego is the Tritons.
So this is SDU.
This is San Diego State. Yeah.
No. San Diego State's the Aztecs.
Sorry, this is University of San Diego.
Okay. All right.
I believe it's one of the San Diego schools. People give us credit.
Are you sure it is the San Diego University?
Or San Diego University.
Yeah, I think that's.
I know it's Aztecs, Tritons, and
it's a San Diego school, though.
We get it right. I'm giving them credit for that.
All right, so we don't know Blue Hose though, so we're gonna have to take a guess there, and we're semi guessing. I think the Jasper's Manhattan. All right, so keep on going here. Hoosiers is Indiana. Roadrunners is.
Ooh, actually, I did.
Isn't that Texas Rio Grande?
That sounds right.
I think. Are they the Vipers? Or are they the Vipers?
No, yeah, Rio Grande's the Vipers. I'm pretty sure Rio Grande's the Vipers. I don't know.
One of those Texas schools.
It's a Texas school, but I couldn't tell you.
Let's say Texas San Antonio.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right. Lumberjacks. God, I should know this.
Northern Arizona. That is Northern Arizona.
All right, Golden
They have the best cross country team in the country. So I follow track and field and cross country on the side, and they're legit.
Golden Hurricane is Tulsa. That's Tulsa. Yeah. The Mocs is that's short for moccasins, and that's Chattanooga. Shockers is Wichita State. David Deacons is Wake Forest. The Zips is Akron.
Yeah.
Now the Seawolves, I think, is Coastal Carolina.
They're another school that I've looked at. Stony Brook.
Stony Brook.
I'm 99% sure that's Stony Brook.
Wow. The Hokies is Virginia Tech. Anteaters is Cal Irvine. And
I don't know what the hell this last one is.
That's a Saluki. It's a Saluki, and the Saluki is a extinct Egyptian dog. I looked this up one time because I was like, what the hell is a Saluki? So it's a dog, and it's Southern Illinois. All right.
The Illinois schools are the weird ones then, because Northern Illinois was the
so I'm looking over the answers. Blue Hose is Presbyterian in the big town. Yeah. Jaspers is Manhattan. Oh, we got the Roadrunners right. Texas San Antonio. And
Salukis was the other one that
the only one we didn't get was the Blue Hose.
Who was Salukis?
Huh? Southern Illinois.
They were Southern Illinois. Okay.
Yeah, I knew that one.
Blue Hose.
Yeah, Southern Illinois has a pretty good basketball history, so
would not have gotten that.
That was a fun question. Thank you, Rhonda. Folks, please keep in mind to always send your questions. Keep on sending them, please, to admin@hoopsprospects.com. That's ADMIN at hoopsprospects.com. I want to thank all of our listeners and our special guest, Chris Solari. Unfortunately, we couldn't hook up with Keontae, but I know we've been in touch with the school, and we will be speaking to him sometime soon. We'll be back next week with another stock report, a special guest, and much more. So we'll see you soon, folks. Mookie, come get on the show. Come on, say hello to Drew.